OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, slightly unusual weekend, and obviously there was no Premier League, but if you've got anything you want to talk to us about this morning, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream or however else you want to get in touch with us this morning. We welcome it. Kathleen McIlroy is with us all the way until 10 this morning. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm doing good. I don't really know what to do with myself over the weekend without any football to watch, but managed to get through all right.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit strange. Obviously, Shane Lowry winning was something that very many Irish people were able to plonk themselves in front of the TV and enjoy over the course of yesterday. The Sevens suddenly flirted briefly with getting into the mainstream sporting consciousness, maybe?
Very closely. Best result they've ever had. So, I mean, it's definitely something for the future that we hopefully can keep building on. I know there's been a lot of talk, especially on the women's side, about Sevens in this country with a connection to the main squad, but yeah, I mean, it's a great result. We will talk about it a little bit later on about how great we actually think it is.
It's made for TV, right? It's made for social media as opposed to TV, where like Bevan Parsons gets the ball, runs past 6 people, and touches down. It's try, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. I do wonder how, as a country, we have tapped into the sport. I mean, it's funny, like they are very well supported on social media, but do 15s fans like Sevens rugby?
I don't think it has fully tapped into that consciousness just yet. I mean, it's kind of like you were saying there, whenever an Irish team briefly flirts with any sort of success, we all jump on the bandwagon. It doesn't really matter how interested we are in the sport or not. I think
I'm all in favour of bandwagons, I have to say, but
we need more of them. As a small country, we have to take as many of them as we can get. I don't know. I think people kind of look down their noses slightly on Sevens if you're a 15 supporter, or at least that's with conversations I've had with people, that tends to be it. And I don't think they see it as hard a sport or as competitive a sport. And maybe that is just as well the difference in terms of the professionalism of it all. But yeah, I mean, like, it was a great achievement and long may it continue.
What about the draw on Friday? It feels like a long time ago now at this stage still to be talking about the draw, but it was a bit of a stinker of a draw. We're going to be going to Scotland or Austria. We're going to be going to Austria, really, right?
Yeah, that seems to be the most likely outcome. Although if we do go to Scotland, we'll be playing in Hampton Park, which will be quite cool. It was the worst draw we could have got. I'm not saying that doesn't mean we're not going to qualify from it, but I think it definitely seems a lot more likely now that we will be going to that intercontinental tournament in New Zealand in the new year. I mean, I literally, as they were calling the names out, I was like, please not us, please not us, please not us. And then it happened. And I think it's interesting because it's the one thing like Vera Pauw or Katie McCabe or a lot of the team have talked about, that we haven't really had a lot of luck. We've had to go through things ourselves and we've had to rely on ourselves, and we were really hoping that this was going to be the stage where we get that little bit of the rub of the green, but sadly wasn't to be. Although if we beat Austria or Scotland and that ends up being our little bit of luck, then I will be perfectly happy with that.
They're both ranked ahead of us in the world, right?
Yes. It's not by much. I think we're 26th, Austria are 20th and Scotland are 23rd.
Here's the proof in the truism that, we're better against the good teams because we actually play a very defensive style of football, and we'll be happy for them to have the ball. So, you know, maybe it's all been building up to this for a famous away win to get us, even if we win this, the likelihood is we're just going to the intercontinental tournament as opposed to actually getting to the World Cup.
Yeah, we need someone else to do us a favour. Although, of the teams, I didn't really want Austria. If we play Scotland, I think we're in with a good chance of winning, and I would have rather them than, say, like a Portugal or something, who play a very skillful one-touch.
We could just kick them though, right?
We could, but other teams tried it during the Euros and were sadly mistaken in their tactics. So I'd rather take a Scotland or someone that we actually know a bit better than maybe a Portuguese side. But actually that doesn't matter now because we're playing either Scotland or Austria.
We're going to talk about Chelsea and we're going to talk about Spurs season so far. There is going to be European action this week. Sporting and Tottenham are playing tomorrow night in the Champions League. That one is in Lisbon. Martin Lipton's going to join us in a while, but we should talk about Thomas Tuchel's statement, which came out yesterday on the weirdest Twitter account that there is out there. It's at T Tuchel official, and he uses it so often that Twitter didn't even bother verifying this one. So, you know, you pay your money, you take your choice. The last tweet before this was in 2020, which was in German. And the one before that was him retweeting PSG's announcement that he was getting a contract all the way through till 2021, which obviously didn't happen. And then the one before that is a picture of him in Paris. And the one before that is a picture of him, Noel Gallagher and Ilkay Gundogan at Man City Spurs, where it looks like he's a tourist from 2017. It's like hanging out.
What a combination. When I first saw this account, I was fully convinced it wasn't real, and it was only when a lot of the bigger papers and stuff actually reported it, and like Reuters had a line out on it, I was like, oh, this is actually his real account.
You do need to be careful with that stuff. I mean, obviously the Daily Mail were reporting on Tony Cascarino's somber not eating of his Chinese, and then it turned out that wasn't true at all. It's like, we were just talking about it in the office, it's kind of genius in that, like, it's totally believable. They're the ones, the best parodies are like, I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but it could be true.
The same guy who tweeted the Tony Cascarino stuff had also tweeted something else the other week that had gone viral, and the Daily Mail had also picked up on that. So I feel like they were just mining him for good stories at this stage.
I think Mary Hannigan pointed out that he might be the same guy. Maybe it might not be Mary Hannigan. Somebody else pointed out that this could well be the same person who had the infamous line about Frank Lampard going, well, I voted Tory and I agree with all their policies, but I'm not a Tory. Apparently he never said it. He didn't say it, so he may well be a Tory. I guess is the point that we should make from that. But anyway, back to Thomas Tuchel's statement. This is one of the most difficult statements I've ever had to write, and it is one which I hoped I would not need to do for many years. I'm devastated that my time at Chelsea has come to an end. This is a club where I felt at home, both professionally and personally. Thank you so much to all the staff, the players and supporters for making me feel very welcome from the start. The pride and joy I felt at helping the team to win the Champions League and the Club World Cup will stay with me forever. I'm honoured to have been a part of this club's history, and the memories of the last 19 months will always have a special place in my heart. In our accelerated culture, 19 months as the Chelsea boss is a lifetime in many cases. So it does open up the question, where does he go next?
I don't know. I mean, I saw people talking about Juventus as a possible option for him next. I mean, he should really have his pick of the places. I know he left Chelsea with a lot of the stuff around him about culture and that he didn't get on well with Bowley, but I mean, if you look at his record there, what he actually managed to do with the team, I still think it was a little unfair that they got rid of him when they did. I think they should have given him a bit more time.
You know, you would say based on track record of success, etc. Yeah, except that, like, if the relationship with the owners breaks down to a point where he's blue ticking them on WhatsApp, you just can't do that.
That is true.
The weird communication and the use of the Twitter account is definitely something. I don't know. Is there a possibility that he's really damaged by this? That, like,
I think it depends on what happens in the, like, general behind the scenes circles. I don't think he's going to be really, really damaged. I think there'll definitely be clubs out there who'll see that there are two sides to the whole thing, and that, well, maybe the owners should have made more of an effort to ask him, like, what he wanted to do within the club and the role he wanted to play. Because it seems to be that Bowley came in and just took over a little bit and told him exactly what he wanted from him and didn't leave a lot of room for manoeuvre there. And Tuchel doesn't strike me as the sort of man who reacts well to that. So
fair enough. So maybe if, like, in the Bayern Munich scenario where there's loads of people whose job it is to sign the players and he has some involvement but not all the things, and he's, like, not actually having to do any extra work other than coaching the team, and everybody's being signed with it.
And if you look at the relationship that he had with Abramovich and what he did guide Chelsea through last season, rightly or wrongly, they were able to get on, so he's clearly able to get on with some people.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder how much of that I'm putting on my CV. Gets on well with oligarchs. I mean, look, maybe that's gets on well with oligarchs from a part of the world, but not the other side of the world.
Well, I was going to say, when you look at who owns most football clubs, then that's probably something all right to have on your CV.
It's 7:39 this morning. You're watching OTB AM. We're live with you each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It is time for the performance rankings. And, sorry, here's what's coming up. Yeah, 7:35 performance rankings. A bit late. Martin Lipton's going to join us at 8:10 this morning. We'll run you through the sports pages and the weekend's Club GAA. Mike Carlson's going to join us. The NFL is back. That'll be at 9:50. Jenny Claffey's going to join us in studio. Carlos Alcaraz has announced himself as an absolute global superstar after winning the US Open. Swiatek the night before had cemented her place as a superstar. That's a 19 and a 21-year-old who are dominating at the US Open. And some brilliant stuff from Brian Kerr and Kenny Cunningham yesterday in studio instead of our live football. It's going to be very interesting to see when they get all these games played and if they just announce that the entire season is going to go back an extra week. So we'll talk about that and everything else coming up in the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
So just to explain, we use a traffic light system in case you're new to this. Green is generally good. Amber is like, oh, not sure if you're good or bad, or, you know, you could be better or it could be worse. And then red is obviously for the bad. Maybe reveal a little bit about how today's show has been made. There's a lot of golf in this, Kathleen. I didn't have you pegged as a golf wanker like the rest of the people here, but actually these were Nathan's performance rankings that we're doing.
These are Nathan's performance rankings, and you're very right about me not being a golf aficionado. It wouldn't be my strongest sport in the world, but we're going to give it a go anyways. And sure, I was following along yesterday, as I think most of Ireland was, like you were saying at the top of the show, with Lowry and McIlroy both in contention. Are we starting with the bad golf or the good golf?
Let's start with the bad golf.
Start with the bad golf.
I think, so there was a really interesting interview yesterday with Patrick Reed in the Sunday Times where he was talking about how they've turned him into the black hat and that there's a massive conspiracy that golf decided they needed a villain. Patrick Reed won a tournament. It was like, oh, I'm the top 5 players in the world. And everybody was like, yeah, you're the guy. And he was making the point that so Patrick Reed was accused of all sorts of things, cheating and theft while he was in college. He says he's got 2 sworn affidavits essentially from coaches to say that the cheating never happened and the theft never happened, which, you know, is kind of important because that was the first story that came out about Patrick Reed. And then there was all the stuff about him essentially divorcing his family, not quite Macaulay Culkin style, but similar enough that, that the family aren't in contact anymore, and that his wife has taken the brunt of American golf fans who, let's face it, might be the worst people on the planet. You know, there's like
They're not a great bunch.
the competition is very intense, but American golf fans will be right up there as some of the worst people on the planet. And how frequently, you know, she's crying behind her sunglasses. And so that was the piece that was published on Sunday morning, I think, in the Sunday Times. And then he ripped the course up with a 62 and was like, he's going to win this tournament. This is absolutely sensational. So that would have been like the biggest triumph that Live Golf could possibly have had if Patrick Reed tells everybody, actually, there is this conspiracy. He's got a like multi-hundreds of millions, I can't remember, is it 260 or is it 700 million lawsuit going against the Golf Channel and NBC and one of the Golf Channel commentators. So it's wild stuff, right? It's like very, very interesting stuff. On the other side of this, from the Live Golf perspective, is Sergio Garcia, who has not come out very well from all of the stories around the transfer of Liv over. The texts between him and Greg Norman were obviously released as part of the ongoing court case, which, again, won't finally work its way through the system until early next year. And it seemed like he was earning his money for Liv.
Garcia always just seems to be at the front of something controversial, or at the front, like it's consistently week in, week out, he is saying something that offends someone, or he is doing something that offends the culture of golf, or the I suppose, politeness that they like to think that they put around the entire thing. And I think the fact that after everything everyone has said about Liv, what he did this weekend was not great at all when you think of the players that are stuck up in this legal case and don't get to play. So one of Patrick Reed's points was like, I deserve to be here. I have done as much for this tour as anybody has. I've played it as often, if not more often, than a lot of the people complaining about the fact that I'm and other Live golfers are here. So he might have a case. I don't know the stats on how often he's played in the European Tour or the DP World Tour or the DP Tour, whatever it's called these days, over the last number of years. But he certainly felt like he was worthy of his place in the field at Wentworth. It's a big tournament from a European Tour perspective. You know, there's points and money on offer that will allow some people to save their card and so therefore save their livelihood. And that's why pre-tournament, McIlroy was saying, you know, these guys shouldn't be here. They're taking up space that other people really need. There was a bunch of people who'd said that. Lowry said the same thing. One of the people who, you know, who was supposed to be like a European Tour, you know, Ryder Cup, if there was a crest on his heart, I'm sure he would have kissed it for the crowd performatively down through the years, was Sergio Garcia, who took his place in the tournament, right? And then stank the joint out on day one, 4 over par. Day two, as we know, got cancelled.
And then there was a debate about whether or not it was going to happen again. And then day 3, come tee-off time.
Just isn't there.
No, doesn't show up. It's like, well, I'm not going to win now. There's no cut, right? So there's no reason to leave. Oh, sorry. There was a cut after those rounds, wasn't there?
I think there was.
Okay. Either way, Sergio Garcia withdraws from the BMW PGA.
And of course he goes quietly. He doesn't turn up anywhere that he shouldn't turn up afterwards, right?
Texas, Alabama. Big game in college football. You know, two big teams. And there he is in the end zone, pre-kickoff, having the crack. I don't know who he's with, but he's with somebody. I don't know if that's... I actually don't know. Is that his wife?
I have no idea.
It could be. I'm not sure. So there you go. Sergio, not arsed playing in the tournament that he's taken the place of somebody who really needs the place. Has done his little bit of shilling for Liv, and maybe he should be the black hat as opposed to Patrick Reed. He certainly, you know, he fits the bill.
Off the basis of the weekend, I think he deserves it. And it's a bit like you were saying. I mean, maybe Patrick Reed has played this event many, many times before and has earned that place there. But even just the fact that he turned up and stayed and didn't go fly over to the States for a college football game, because he would have had to have known he was going to that game a day or two before to actually make it over there. So he clearly finished up on the Thursday and just went, right, well, that's me. I'm gone.
It turns out, and Greg Allen tweeted this, Alfredo Farcia Heredia was the first alternate in the tournament. So if Garcia had pulled out instead of playing, your man would have got in. And his current situation is he's 134th on the road to Dubai with the cutoff for a card next season at 121. So he could easily have won enough money to save his career. And he also happens to be a Spaniard. So I'm sure Sergio Garcia is very, very popular in that gaff and everywhere else. So look, you know, when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them.
Very much so. Very, very much so. And it's sad, it's like you said, like it's actually harming someone's career, someone's potential earnings in the future for a man that definitely does not need extra money. Yeah,
so I think it's fair enough that Nathan would have put him in the red this morning.
No, I agree with Nathan on that one, despite not being the aficionado that Nathan is.
Hopefully we've done some justice to it. Right. Okay, if you have a view on that, you can leave a comment in the YouTube stream, or of course you can always get us at Off the Ball AM on Twitter. Now, also in the red this morning, women's football in Galway.
Yeah, Galway United FC, they're not connected to Galway United, released a statement over the weekend saying that they had reluctantly decided not to apply for inclusion in next season's Women's National League. And the statement was quite strange because they went on to talk about all the success they had had. You know, they mentioned the players that have come through the club that have been successful. They're only 5th in the league at the moment, so it's not like they're performing badly or anything. And it's just interesting because it just seems like another thing coming out of this Galway team where they aren't performing all that well. I mean, they had Ruth Fahy as CEO for... I think it was a couple of months in the end, and then ended up having to release an apology to her saying that they didn't have the structures in place to actually support a full-time CEO. And it's sad for women's football in the country. It's sad for football in the country, and it's also sad for football in the West because, you know, we had Sligo Rovers joining this season. Everyone was really excited. There was a new team, new competition. Obviously, the women's team is smashing it at the moment as well. So I'm not sure. There has been some talk that maybe they will come under the Galway United banner, and that's why Galway have announced this, because they're confident that will happen. But yeah, it just seems strange to go ahead with it if that is the case without a little bit of a backup plan, or at least be able to say, like, look guys, we've built all this and we've done all these amazing things. We're now passing the baton on to someone else and it's coming under that team. But that's not what they decided to do.
As you say, they're 5th in the table at the moment, and it's like completely safe mid-table. You know, they're on 36 points. Wexford Hughes and Shelburne are 49 and 48 points. So, like, they're not disgracing themselves. This isn't like everything has gone to pot to complete shambles. It's actually the opposite. They seem to have built, and the statement is suggesting that they've built a throughput of talent. So it's a big challenge to the football people of Galway to rally around and, you know, get together and come and sort it out. The speculation about Galway United is interesting, right? Because obviously Galway United's takeover by the Comer Group has been affected, and so it looked like finally football in Galway is on a very secure footing. So it would make sense if under one banner football was to progress, but you would tend to hope that that would be done in the background and this announcement would happen. We're changing to Galway United. The systems have been put in place.
Yeah, exactly. And I know like there is a lot of eagerness for League of Ireland and like WNL clubs to be under the one banner within the FAI. So if that is the case, great, more power to them. But also it seems a bit weird, and even with them blaming additional costs and demanding of time, and you're like, well, if you're a club that were looking at putting in a full-time CEO last year and now you're all of a sudden saying it all costs too much and you can't run a club effectively, it sounds like there's something more going on there, and I feel like this is definitely not the last we've heard of this story. Yeah,
hopefully there is a team from Galway, and ideally from the same club as the men's team, and football in Galway can, because it's like a hotbed of talent. Like that's the main point here, is that like loads of young players have come through over the last while and are making it. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. In the amber today, we have decided to put the sevens.
The Irish sevens, yeah. So the men today, well, we were kind of debating about this one in the office beforehand because it was their best ever finish in.
So it's kind of in the green. It's just
it's kind of in the green.
We only have room for 2 greens. Is that what we're saying here?
A little bit. And I think while it was great that they got to where they did, I think there was some disappointment, especially with the defeat to New Zealand, in that we could have very easily snuck a bit of a win there, and we didn't manage to do it. So great that to win the bronze medal and beat Australia in 1914. And you look at the names we're beating, like South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. We all know that they're big teams when it comes to rugby, whether they're 7s or 15s. So I think it was a great success for the men's and builds on a great year for them in general.
It's harsh that they're not in the green, in fairness.
It is it's a little harsh.
Anytime you reach a Rugby World Cup semi-final, you're trailblazers, it turns out, because we obviously have a quarter-final hex. We're like the Mayo footballers, slightly hexed. However, we just didn't have enough room for green, right?
Yeah,
they're officially the women's team. I think would they consider themselves unfortunate, but they ended up, was it in the 5th to 7th?
Yeah. And so it wasn't for them. It definitely wasn't the tournament I think that they wanted, especially after all the attention there has been on them this year. But we can salute the men for what they did, and we swear that this is a positive orange. This is, we see what you're doing, and we're expecting you to do more next year because you're growing.
Yeah. Okay. Comments coming through. Apparently the football was cancelled as they expected fans to boo during the minute's silence, especially places like Liverpool, says Damien. I mean, are they that terrified of a few people booing? I guess they are. If you were to look at the Trevor Sinclair cancellation for like pointing out that, there's a kind of slightly difficult history here around colonialism, folks, that maybe this might be a big opportunity for us to revisit our attitudes. Maybe a few boos would have been like, it might have been nice to see what their fallout.
Yeah. Well, there was an argument that it would make them look bad across the world, and I feel like there's very mixed opinions across the world about the monarchy in general. So
I think that's safe to say. Yeah.
So there are some people that would be like, oh well, that's not very respectful. But I don't think it would have been the massive thing that the FA or the Premier League seem to think it was. Like,
or else you're a functioning democracy, and people are saying, you're actually a democracy, and people are saying, I have a difference of opinion here. Mm-hmm. Like it's, and again, I don't know if people were specifically booing the dead queen as opposed to booing the notion of having a queen, because they're separate things. But it's, there's no time for nuance when the signs are up. We're in mourning, and it's the opposite of house private. So it's been very interesting to watch what's going on. The golfers were pulled off the course, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. They're ruining the golf for the weekend, particularly when Shane Lowry's in such good form. And then it's like, no, go back out. What's the big deal? Like, we just play. It's fine.
And even like sports like rugby went ahead. I mean, most sports in England went ahead, I think, apart from the football argument being that she was like patron of the FA and it meant a bit more and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, wishy-washy, like very wishy-washy.
Yeah. I don't know, I think maybe, I don't know if they acted in haste or if there was something more to it, but it just does seem very bizarre that of all sports, it didn't go ahead.
We're going to talk... Sorry, go on.
Well, because you could just do, I think it would have made more sense to actually do tributes to her at the games, and it would have, rather than just nothing at all. I don't really get the whole idea of having complete silence over everything.
Yeah, a minute's applause, maybe. Do you know? Is there like
Exactly.
Is there
And
an
get rid of the
alternative
booze then.
here? Okay, so in the green.
We have the one and only Shane Lowry, and also we have the winner of the US Open, Alcaraz, the future of tennis.
Yeah, it is here. It is now. He started the season like a house on fire, had a bit of a wobble around Wimbledon time, and then roared back in. And Jenny Claffey's going to join us in studio, so we can talk about this a bit more later on. Swiatek, as I said, fairly sensational performance from her across the whole year, again with the exception of Wimbledon. So I don't know, maybe the fact that Wimbledon had no ranking points this year, the kids were like,
just didn't care as much.
no, not having it, don't care, show me your tradition, show me the ranking points, that's all. So we'll see next season if they both come and win in Wimbledon. We'll be able to retrospectively fit that narrative nicely to it. But to the golf, right? So as I said, black hat Patrick Reed comes out and rips the course up yesterday and sets a clubhouse lead and sets a great score. And then John Rahm starts like firing in the birdies, and Shane Lowry matches them. And coming down the last, Lowry has a putt for eagle that he tickles down to the hole, gives himself a one-stroke lead, and the only other golfer out on the course with the opportunity to do anything to stop him winning is Rory McIlroy. And
saw a lot of very confused fans yesterday about who they're supposed to be shouting for.
Well, that's it, right? I think if you trace the week that Rory McIlroy has had, like the CEO of Whoop last week was tweeting that there's no other sport that needs this one athlete more than golf at the moment. And he got a lot of flack for that. But like he's an independent person. He's not like an Irish person who's going, Rory McIlroy's the most important person in golf. But like over the last 5 months, Rory McIlroy has become the most important person in golf. Like Tiger is kind of obviously in the background, but not the force that he was because of the car accident, and is still recovering and recuperating for that. They've invented a whole new sport to try and popularise it, where they're going to go to places like, the O2 Arena, pardon me, and the stadium thing that they're talking about doing. So we'll see whether or not that works. He's like been this single bulwark against live golf. If he had decided to go, that would have been it. Like golf would have been completely changed, and the amount of money that they must have offered him to do that is eye-watering. Like it's the type of money that would all the other golfers have found it impossible to turn down. But if they got Rory, that would have been the end of it. And so he comes out and puts his best form together, and wins the 16 million or whatever it was 2 weeks ago. And then on the last, he's standing over the ball in the fairway, knowing that he needs to make eagle to force a playoff against Lowry, who has been, in fairness, also this week very strong about the whole thing. And he stitches it, and then he's standing over the putt, and it's like, well, was it Wayne Riley doing the commentary? The giant white hole is calling the ball towards it here. And I don't know if you saw the putt, but it
I did, yeah.
One more revolution, he just didn't hit it.
Do you think he's trying to make another hero for the golf tour?
Oh wow! I don't think so. I think he's such a competitor that. But what a playoff it would have been!
Oh, it would have been sensational, and I feel like there would have been a lot of hoarse voices afterwards. But it was great to see Lowry win, and even his speech afterwards I thought was very good. And like you say, much like McIlroy, he has been one of the voices speaking out against Liv over the last week, and he's been quite strong. And I did kind of like when he was saying this is a win for the good guys. After all the talk there had been during the week about what was going to happen at this event, and I think maybe it was slightly calmed down by the fact that the Queen died and there was that extra day. I think attention moved off the politics of it slightly over the whole event.
And then Patrick Reed brought it all back up on Sunday morning.
Patrick Reed brought it all back up on Sunday morning.
And no better man. Like Patrick Reed's going to be an interesting character in this whole thing now over the next while. He's obviously decided he's going to start talking about stuff. He said he won't talk about the family stuff, and so therefore he's got no defence against people accusing him of, whatever it is that they're accusing him of. So that will be interesting to see how that develops. Here's a question from the comments that I don't know the answer to. Would that have been the first all-Irish playoff on the tour if Rory had held that putt? That's from Rick Jagger. I don't know. Is there anybody out there who's a golf history buff who could tell us? Has there ever been a playoff with just a couple of Irish golfers? I don't know. Was there ever one with Harrington and somebody.
That's what I was thinking.
Was there ever one? I don't know. I mean, do you think that would be the era?
If Nathan is sitting at home listening, he can text into the show, because I feel like that's the sort of thing he might know.
From his sickbed. Danny Mack says, I like history, so after watching the monarchy history over the weekend, the Bundesliga should have been cancelled. Hey, see what you did there, Danny. We see what you did there. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or of course you can get us on at Off the Ball AM on Twitter, is the best Twitter handle for the show. In terms of the tennis, right, so like quietly, almost imperceptibly, the era of Djokovic, Federer and Nadal has passed. Federer out with injury and may come and play like some kind of Heritage Act next season. Jenny Claffey was not writing Nadal off, just that the only match that he lost this year in the slams was at the US Open. It's just that the power that he had over everybody was kind of psychological in a way, and that seems to have been broken just because his body is breaking down. And the other thing that's happened is obviously the young players coming through are really bloody good. So I don't know how you feel about the end of that era and the fact that something new is happening.
I'm kind of excited for it. I mean, that's not to say that I didn't enjoy watching the three lads absolutely dominate, but it is nice to have other people to talk about and new conversations to have, because it does get to a point where there is only so many times you can say that people are unreal. I was fortunate enough to see a lot of the younger players play in Wimbledon when I covered it, not this year, this summer before, and there's just such an excitement, and like you say, like the bodies of Nadal and Federer, like they are breaking down. They're not able to move around a court in the way that they used to be. They're still incredible athletes, but you watching these younger players and there's a lightness to them that the older players might not have anymore. I agree with what Jenny said last week about not writing Nadal off yet. I think you look at the way he played this season, it's not as great as it has been in the past, but he still has a lot to give. Federer, I don't think anyone really expects all that much out of Federer for the rest of the time that he does play. And I mean, Djokovic is Djokovic. He's still, like, as much as these young guys are coming up, they still do have to get past that barrier of those, and those guys, as long as they're playing, they are going to be like a concern. And I think there's a difference aura around them to say there is someone like Serena when she was coming to the end of her career. She was very much petering out, whereas I don't think Nadal is quite there, and Djokovic definitely isn't there yet. So I'm excited to see these younger players come up, and I'm excited to talk about something else for a while, because it's why I've always preferred the women's draw to a certain extent, because you do have a bit more competition and there are a few more names in the loop, and it's not just the same three, which is probably sacrilegious of me to say to some people who are big Federer, Nadal and Djokovic fans.
It's funny, I totally understand the point. It's just that it felt like their greatness was so great, like as compared with other previous eras. I don't know, maybe the way that the game has evolved, there would have been other, like the amount of money that you win for winning the majors, the amount of prestige that you win for winning the majors. I don't know if there was more money on offer for things like the end of season. I remember there was a gold racket that Ivan Lendl used to win every year, which was actually worth as much, if not more, than, so therefore he put all his attention into that. So I don't know if what caused those three great players to rise up simultaneously, or fairly close to being simultaneous. But Alcaraz was involved in a 5-setter in the round of 16, a 5-setter in the quarterfinal, a 5-setter in the semi, and then a handy 4-setter in the finals against Ruud, which means that, like, he didn't have it easy, and I think was the second longest match in US Open history. Was one of them was either the quarterfinal. I think it was the quarterfinal against Sinner.
Yeah, it was the quarterfinal. That was the one that went on until like 3 a.m. in the morning. It was absolutely ridiculous.
So he didn't win it easy. And it is exactly the type of thing that is going to make everybody stand up and take notice. And again, he's not 20 until next May. So I don't know exactly when the French Open is next year, but certainly he's the youngest. I think the youngest world number one. It's basically the birth of a superstar has happened on Amazon Prime this week. So
youngest US Open winner since Pete Sampras, I think, as well.
Okay, he had an okay career.
Yeah, in 1990. So, and he played Agassi in that final. So
Yeah, that was an era, right, where those guys were, you would have said, very talented. I don't know what the difference between them and the Djokovic, Nadal and the hoovering up of all of the majors is.
I think it's just the complete dominance of them. Like, there wasn't anyone else in the conversation for so long, and it's so rare you get that in a sport where you might have one team or one player who's particularly good, but to have three competing in a single person sport at the same time and just no one being able to get near them, it's like, it is insane. I don't know if we will ever see the likes of it again. I hope we do, but it does feel like a once in a lifetime thing.
Yeah, unless Rude and Alcaraz and
Sinner
or TFO, we'll see.
Yeah.
He's a bit older. He's 24. He's now lad making the breakthrough
ancient.
at this. Yeah. Right. If you've got a view on anything that we've covered or haven't covered, then we'd love to hear from you this morning. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. We should give a shout out here to John Duggan and Virtual Insanity for the insane run that he is on at the moment. He tipped his headline tip this week was Shane Lowry for the golf, and for those of you who were on his headline tip, he also mentioned Patrick Reed, I think. I think his profits up, it was 22% heading into this one, so we'll get the exact figures for you later on in the week, but he is a man on fire as it stands for there. Was there anybody else that we wanted to put in the green? Was there anything else?
I think we covered it all there. I thought Ciara McGeehan had another good run at the weekend.
The Fifth Avenue Mile was the race. We talked a little bit about this with Eamon Coughlin on the show last week in advance of the Griffith Avenue Mile, which is next week, and now it turns out they shut down Fifth Avenue for that. She was beaten by Laura Muir in that, so Muir obviously turning the tables on her from the Diamond League.
I was going to say, I feel like that's the classic rivalry between the two of them. They seem to go toe-to-toe quite a lot.
Yeah, it's brewing into something nicely and coming up to the boil, so hopefully there'll be plenty of them in the Diamond Leagues next year, and they hopefully both make loads of money from it. Right, at 7 minutes past 8 though, that is this week's edition of the Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Yeah, if you want to get involved in the performance rankings, the best place to do it is on our Instagram feed. Make sure you subscribe to it's just at Off the Ball. And on Sunday nights, you can tell us what you think should be in the red, in the amber, or indeed in the green. And if you've got any amber suggestions, you're a bit weird, but we would definitely welcome them, because we're, as you can see, struggling to find good stuff to put in the middle part. Right, the Sunday paper review. Clean O'Connor was on alongside Conor McKeown with Joe Malloy in studio just yesterday. Here they are talking about the secretive culture in the GA. Enjoy.
Well, Cliona, you've been involved in like male inter-county coaching ticket, so you'd have a sense of the culture.
Well, I think there's two things at play. There's one, because GAA is such a small ecosystem, that there's definitely a sense of don't say anything, because everybody's so close and we're not giving anything away and everything has to be kept private. And where in reality, what you're doing in one camp, the people down the road are probably doing the exact same thing. We're all doing relatively the same thing, but the sense of don't give anything away, because you're playing against people in college, you might play with them club, everything. So everyone's very connected. So that's one piece. And I think the other piece is, and Colin O'Rourke writes about All-Stars today and David Clifford, but he lists all the things that are more important than an All-Star. The team, even down to a club challenge match is nearly more important than an All-Star. So there's definitely a culture where we don't like the people who stick their head out or do something a little bit different. You have to be ultimately loyal to your team, and that is more important. And don't get too big for your boots, and don't say anything you shouldn't say, and you don't give too much of your individuality, because you are part of this unit and this team. And I think that is culturally a big thing in the GAA.
And to be fair, like, it's interesting when we're talking about Drive to Survive and now golf, they are individual sports. Yeah. You're not letting down anybody. Like Patrick Reed coming out saying, and another thing, McIlroy insulting. He doesn't have to go back to a locker room who are playing McIlroy's team tomorrow and explain himself.
But that's it.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the ball.
You'll get more YouTube moments out of Anthony. They really rated him highly. We saw that in the first half at Old Trafford. He didn't need to be flicking his legs left, right. But it's football, it's entertainment, it's sport. I was in the main stand and people were clapping and laughing, and the Arsenal fans were furious, and great, you can have a bit of that.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts, and download the OTB Sports app.
Celebrate European Week of Sport this September at the Be Active Festival. An action-packed day out for the whole family at Sport Ireland Campus, Blanchardstown. Come and try new sports, fitness challenges and skill tests at Ireland's biggest sporting festival. Meet sporting legends. Check out the Inflatable Zone, Village Food Market and much more. There's something for everyone at the Be Active Festival. Saturday, September 24th at Sport Ireland Campus, Blanchardstown. Book your tickets now at beactivefestival.ie.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FPD branches nationwide. FPD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FPD Insurance plc. FPD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FPD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
11 minutes past 8 this morning. You're very welcome back to OTB AM. If you've got anything you want to talk to us about, you can text the show 0879 180 180, or you can leave a comment in the YouTube stream. Now, a reminder, Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Each week we're giving one lucky viewer a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn coffee goodness at an Apple Green store near you. To enter, check out @OffTheBall on Twitter, like and retweet our Braeburn competition post, and you'll be in the draw. Braeburn Coffee never compromise on quality or taste to give you the best on-the-go coffee experience on the road. And it's available at Apple Green today. Now, to the football. Martin Lipton is with us this morning. Martin, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, very good. You had a weekend off, or at least not a match-going weekend as a result of there being no matches?
No. Even the kids' football was off, which is a bit of a blow. It was supposed to be the start of the season, but I understand why. Sometimes you're going to be damned if you do and damned if you don't, so maybe you better be damned for doing.
What's going to happen next? That's the main thing here, is that this season has already been, and we've been talking about this basically since the start of the transfer windows. Like, you're going to need a big squad to manage playing midweek weekend, all the way up to the World Cup, and then immediately after the World Cup, when your players are all fairly tired after whatever happens, they're going to be playing midweek weekend, all the way until the end of May. Is there just going to be an extra week to the season? Is that the only way to get around this?
They're not allowed to under the contract. It will cost them too much money. It's a fixed date that it has to end. I suspect that they'll squeeze them in. The obvious time to do that would be the middle of January, second and third and fourth weeks of January, when the only things that are scheduled at the moment are the Carabao Cup semi-finals. So you could easily, I think, get most of the games at least, if not all of them, or probably not all of them, because there'll be teams in the Carabao Cup games. But most of those games can be played in that window. But you're still likely, I suspect, to have some of the teams in Europe not getting the games played, particularly as, you know, one of the games that was cancelled at the weekend was City versus Spurs. Now, given City have been virtually every final, it seems, of the League Cup forever, except last season, the chances of neither Spurs nor City being in this year's semi-final are pretty low, you would think. I mean, one of them will be there. So that means that match has to be squeezed. But the Premier League would really, really want Spurs and City to be, if they both qualify in Europe, to be drawn in the same midweek, as it were, in the last 16 round, because that would at least create a space in the other last 16 week to play the match, even if it would mean going up against the UEFA rules, and they could be fined for doing it, but they have to get the matches played. It's going to be tight. It's going to be even tighter if there's matches called off next weekend, and I think it's likely that Chelsea-Liverpool might be called off just because of it being due to be played in London on Sunday, when there's going to be a huge policing operation in the middle of London.
So it has, some of the knock-on impact seems to have been around the policing for sure, and that does seem like it might roll onto it. Were there any other reasons given, or certainly spoken about, around the decision to make the postponements?
I think a bit of it was football is the national game, and it has to show a bit of leadership here. Also, remember, look, you know, the Queen's the patron of the FA. Her grandson is the president of the FA. Sometimes you've got to be seen to do, and you've got to do the right thing. I mean, look, I think there was a slight overreaction, in fact, significant overreaction in terms of the youth football, but not on the professional football. I perfectly understand the decision. I mean, I'm not saying I think it was a brilliant decision, but I understand the rationale behind it. And I also think that a bit of it was a bit of fear. If football had gone ahead, it would have been, typical football. They've gone so woke, they'll have cancel games and they'll do all these minute silences and, protest for Black Lives Matter, but they won't do anything for the Queen. You can't win, can you? So just call it off. I think it would be a mistake to repeat next weekend the grassroots ban. And I don't think that will happen, but we'll find out. But I think the majority of matches will be played. Other than that, there are issues, as we saw, one at Hearts, one not in the UK, obviously in Dublin at Shamrock, but there was a fear that maybe one or two fans might, besmirch a silence. I don't think that would have been a good look for football. I don't think that was a significant factor, but it was a contributory factor.
So it was a melange of different things that went into the decision. We are seeing that away fans have been banned from the Rangers-Napoli game in the Champions League, which seems slightly to have an impact on the integrity of the fixture. Fans seem to be important. Certainly, that's one of the takeaways I would have taken from the whole COVID period. It was like, fans seem to matter. They seem to be able to, teams play better or worse depending on the impact of the fans. Maybe there's nothing, and maybe that's just the way you have to deal with these situations. But are there any concerns about that?
I think you would argue that in the round. Yes, if it was at every game, certainly. I think the UEFA decision obviously is one with specifics to Glasgow on Tuesday/Wednesday. The game couldn't be played Tuesday for policing reasons. If there's no away fans, there's less need for as many police for obvious reasons. The quid pro quo is that Rangers, who are probably looking forward to going to Naples, a lot of the fans, it's a beautiful part of the world, despite the odd occasional issue, it's fair to say, in the city, they can't go as well. So for the game, which is the fifth match, which is arguably potentially a more decisive match, fifth match in the competition, there'll be no away fans in Naples. So it's unfortunate, but it's understandable, I think.
Do you expect all the European games otherwise to go ahead? So basically next weekend we'll know in advance what's going to happen. It looks like, from what you're saying, that there might be that Chelsea-Liverpool fixture might be in danger, but other than that, we would expect everything else to go ahead?
I wouldn't say everything else, because if you call off one game in London because of policing, can you then play Wentworth v Arsenal on Sunday? Can you play Spurs v Leicester on Saturday? I mean, it all depends. I think the games outside London will go ahead. The Premier League games within London is a different issue. It will be discussed. I'm sure they'll make an early decision. They can't let it go on until the end of the week. They've got to decide probably by tomorrow, maybe even as early as today. I'm sure there'll be meetings within the Premier League, with the FA, with the Met, to make a determination. But I anticipate a swift decision. The European games this week are going ahead, and rightly so. National League resumes tonight. There is non-league football, which is also off at the weekend. So I think matches will be played. I think the fact that all the other sports went ahead makes it easier for football to go ahead now, bizarrely. What is interesting, I think, is that I did look it up. So in 1952, which was a bit before I was born, but obviously way before you lot were all born, football went ahead 3 days after King George VI died, and nothing else did. This time it's the other way around. It's a strange world.
They weren't looking at the historical track records. Has there been much feeling on the ground, like how clubs are actually feeling about this? Because, like you say, there's a very small window in January where maybe these matches can get replayed. And if you are a City or a Spurs, presumably, and especially if, say, Spurs game at the weekend doesn't go ahead again, presumably they're not all that happy about that fact, or is it just more there's nothing they really can say at this stage?
It was a decision of the clubs on Friday. So it's their decision. They're cool. I don't think they're particularly happy about it. They just felt it was the right thing to do. And look, last season we had a weekend when only one match was played because of COVID. Leeds Arsenal was the only match played that weekend because there was a COVID wave that went round. They squeezed the matches in. They're used to doing that. In the past it's been bad weather. Now you don't have too much bad weather that affects grounds because of the conditions of the pitches, and the only issue is if actually the surrounds of the grounds are unsafe. The pitches themselves are all properly covered and undersoil heated, so fewer matches get postponed. There's always a bit of wiggle room. They'll always find a way, and if it means playing games at some point, you might have two clubs having to play 3 games in a week. Well, unfortunate, but so be it. I think that'd be the view. But normally there's a way of squeezing games in. There are, remember, 3 official catch-up weekends in March, April and May, which are set aside to play the matches that are postponed. So often there's that opportunity, and if not, they'll have to find another date.
There's a contingency plan in place, and I'm sure it'll be grand, but they definitely need next weekend's games largely to go ahead, so that it's not 2 weekends they're catching up on. Can I just ask you about some of the actual football then? I'd say Chelsea and the new Chelsea manager is pretty happy about the fact that he didn't have to play a game last weekend, and he gets an extra few days of not just recovery with the team, but proper training sessions to try and instill some specific plans on a group of players who are absolutely world class and who are desperate for success.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Graham Potter, you'd much rather have had 4 days before your first game than 1. No surprise there. I also think there's always a bit of new manager bounce, and I'm sure they'll turn up and play because they're all trying to impress the new manager. That happens at every club. But he has got to impose his ideas. I don't think it's necessarily going to be as difficult as it might be at another club. It's not as if he's gone into a club that's in crisis, which is often the way. He's gone to a club that's had a couple of poor results. He's also got some incredibly talented players. What we know from Potter from his time at Ostersunds and at Swansea and at Brighton is that he wants a particular way of playing. He is very determined to stick with his principles. You have to buy into it. Them giving him a 5-year contract is a statement to say, come on, this is the manager. You get along with him or you don't get along at all because we won't have you here anymore. So that was the message that they wanted to put out. But it will take time. You can't expect him to be Harry Potter and wave a magic wand. It doesn't work like that. He's Graham Potter and he's a manager and he's got to spend time making his players understand what he's looking for.
The knee-jerk reaction to the sacking before everything else had happened was, it's new owners but same old Chelsea.
Yeah, I think I can understand that. I mean, I always feel new owners normally means new manager quite quickly at any club because they want their own man. And Tuchel wasn't their own man. I think it's fair to say he can be difficult. And his track record at other clubs shows that. You know, he fell out at Dortmund and he fell out with all the players at PSG, and it looks as though he's fallen out with some of the players at Chelsea. It's in his nature. He's a somewhat cantankerous chap at times, it would appear. But obviously a top manager, there's no doubt about that. And it looked as though they were trying to get on, and they found him impossible to work with because he's a quite idiosyncratic fellow, it would appear. And that doesn't augur well when you start losing at Southampton and Leeds and squeeze past West Ham. The statement they would have gone if whatever happens in Zagreb is what they always say. I think if they won 5-0, it would have been difficult to sack him.
Yeah.
But it means they were waiting for the next defeat to sack him. So the ice was thinner and thinner and thinner to the point where it was gossamer thin and it was going to crack. And Zagreb gave them the opportunity to actually say, well, let's pull the plug now.
Notwithstanding that, right? And that definitely seems to be the case. And they obviously were able to do the deal with Potter and with Brighton really quickly. So they knew about the buyout clause. They knew what they needed to do. They knew the case that they would need to make to him. Why did they sign Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang if they knew that they were getting rid of the manager who he wanted to play for?
This is the greatest question of all, actually, because they gave him Aubameyang and they also gave him Zakaria. And you would have imagined that the reason that Aubameyang went to Chelsea was to play for Tuchel. And the reason and they gave him what they wanted, what he wanted. He demanded more players in the wake of the Southampton defeat. He was very angry at the quality of players that he felt he'd been left with because he didn't think the right issues had been addressed. Well, he's the one who got rid of Werner and Lukaku. So on your own head be it. I think they probably just had enough of him. And they thought, well, we have to have a striker because we haven't got a striker in the club, a proper, 9 or someone who can play centre forward. He's available, but we'll get him anyhow. And also, maybe a bit of it was, well, if we've still got Tuchel as manager when we do the deal, it's more likely that he'll agree to come, which means we've got him. So there's nothing he can do about it if we get rid of the manager. I don't know, but you might think that might be a slightly Machiavellian approach to it. But yeah, it's football, isn't it? So anything goes.
Okay. What is your level of expectation for what's going to happen at Chelsea now? Because it does, again, on the face of it, it felt like same old Chelsea. And now it doesn't feel like that at all. As you say, they've given him a 5-year deal. And they seem to be putting a structure in place. Potter, the rumour was, will be involved in the selection of whoever the technical director is going to be, which is a very American thing where, you know, you put your head coach and your technical director, general manager together and you view them as a duo and they share responsibility and credit and therefore take blame collectively. So if that is what's going to happen, you wouldn't be terribly surprised. It kind of apes what's going on with their baseball team. So he could well be here for the long haul.
Well, the one thing that might alter that actually is a vacancy at Wembley, because I think that Potter was, very much the lead candidate to replace Gareth Southgate as England manager whenever Southgate leaves, and now will have had the experience of running a big club, and for him, I hope successfully, even more the case that they'd want him. But then again, the FA can't pay the sort of money that Chelsea pays, so it's quite an interesting scenario. And if England were to come calling, what would he do? I suppose it depends when England come calling. If Southgate walks out after the World Cup, then Potter won't go. If Southgate walks out after the Euros in 2024, or even after the World Cup in 2026, then maybe more likely. Who knows? We'll see that in the fullness of time. I genuinely think that Potter is an outstandingly impressive manager. I think he's proven that already on pretty limited resources. And as long as the players are willing to buy into his ideas, are going to go with him, they will improve as a team. I think he's excellent. The one thing he lacked, particularly at Brighton, was a 20-goal-a-season striker. If he'd had that, they'd have been knocking on the door of the top four. They're a very good team. Look, they beat Arsenal last year. They beat Spurs. They got results. They've already beaten United this season. I think they beat City in the recent past. They've got a draw at Liverpool last season when Liverpool were playing well. They're a very good team, and that comes down to the manager and his principles and his way of playing. There's no reason to suspect that he shouldn't be able to transplant that, given a bedding in period, at Chelsea and make Chelsea a really, really good team. I think they will be. Whether they might take a little too long this season to impact, I don't know. We'll see that. But he has got quality players, and that gives you, if you just look at the squad, he's got a better quality of squad to start work with than anywhere he's been before. So if you've got a good coach with good players, you probably get a good team.
And do we think they'll continue to spend as much as they have spent within, obviously, whatever restrictions come from financial fair play?
Well, that is the thing. FFP, or financial sustainability rules as it now is, coming in from January for UEFA. I think there's going to be a move towards aping a version of the UEFA model in the Premier League as well. So they'll be restricted to percentile of revenue. So they won't be able to spend quite as much in the short term unless they grow the revenue. They only do that by building the stadium bigger, and that take 3 or 4 years. So I think they'll still spend. It's Chelsea. I think this was a one-off, taking advantage of the situation spend to allow them to spend as much as they had. It's a record sum by an English club, by any club, I think, virtually, apart from when PSG pay ridiculous sums for Neymar and players like that. So they'll still spend. They're Chelsea. It's what they do. They can't. If you don't run, you stand still. Don't. If you stand still, you fall backwards in football. We know that, unfortunately. It's got to be continual evolution, if not revolution, and they'll have to spend. But they have to pay players that work for Potter. That means players who are willing to press, who are willing to put that effort in, who want to play that system. The one thing that helps him, I think, in the short term is he's got at least one, we think, dressing room disciple in Cucurella, who played for him last season.
Can they cancel the Billy Gilmore deal and get him back? Is there any banking rules like, oh, sorry, that check bounced, we're going to take that guy back?
No. Unfortunately, well, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, Gilmore. I can't work out whether Gilmore is a really good player who's gone backwards or was overhyped. And I don't know. I'm not being critical. I haven't seen enough of him. But at Norwich last year, he didn't exactly pull up too many trees, did he? Tuchel obviously didn't fancy him. but Potter clearly did because he's taken him in at Brighton, maybe just to give himself an extra option in terms of the way they play. But at the moment, that boat's gone. That's floated out to sea and can't come back, at least until there's a transfer window.
How do you think Spurs have done so far this season?
They haven't played well, have they? And yet they haven't lost. Very strange. It's not like Spurs at all. I thought they played quite well against Fulham. They were measured, actually, against Marseille, weren't they, in midweek? They didn't play particularly well. You never thought they were going to lose the game. You thought they'd probably find a way, and lo and behold, they did. The first real test would have been on Saturday, and that's now delayed, for months. So the next... it'd be a tough game tomorrow night in Lisbon. And Sporting smashed Frankfurt, didn't they, away 3-0 last week. So they're in decent nick. Then Spurs got Leicester at the weekend. And then it's the international break and they come back and play Arsenal. So we still don't quite know what they are. What we do know is that they're organised, they run hard, they don't concede too many goals, and they've always got a goal in them because they've got 4, even though Son hasn't scored yet, but he will score, we know that. They've got 4 who can score. That gives them an advantage, doesn't it? And also, I think, surprise for me has been Emerson has been better this season than before. He still doesn't thrill you on the ball, but he has been involved in creating goals, and he doesn't make too many mistakes at the back. So they've had a bit more solidity about them this year.
They're not the stereotypical European team at the moment who are heavy metal football. They're definitely a variation of the Conte Chelsea team with maybe a different collection of talented players. So it's going to be interesting to see how that style competes over the course of the season against Pep and against whatever else the challenge is going to be. But you wouldn't be terribly surprised if they were able to actually sustain this and get better, grow into the season, that they're doing it now from a base where it's incredibly solid, incredibly difficult to beat. And then as players come into form, as players develop understanding of what the requirements are and those partnerships build, I guess I'm roundabout saying here that Spurs are in a really great situation at the moment, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a virtuous circle off the pitch there because of the money that's coming in. £6 million per every home game. They're in a position where, they are comfortably well placed to deal with all the financial vicissitudes that have come across football and the world, which is really good for them. They've got a very strong structure. They've got goals up top. I mean, if Kane gets injured, can you rely on Richarlison to score? Well, what you saw last week, probably yes. It wouldn't be as devastating now if Kane lost a month than it has been at any point in the last 6 years, which is a testament to the way that Paratici and Conte have gone about this rebuilding. Bentancur has been excellent. We haven't really seen Basuma yet, but we know that there's a player there. Kulusevski's been excellent since he came in January. Richarlison looks to have really made himself popular with the fans. You can see that. They're decent nick, aren't they? Whether they're good enough to challenge for the title, I'm less sure. I still think City are going to prove to be far and away the best team because Haaland's going to score 50 goals at this rate, if not more. But with Liverpool being slightly off, I mean, the two teams that you could argue outside City that have impressed so far have been Spurs and Arsenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And Arsenal had the blip against Manchester United. It'd be very interesting to see how they respond to that. And that was kind of, again, maybe Arteta won't mind having those extra few days before, and maybe an extra week before the next Premier League game. The last thing there, you talked about Liverpool being slightly off it. Can they get it back, or is this going to be a down season for them where they have to try and recalibrate? Because Klopp was kind of talking about reinvention, and it's not, he seems to have had just some kind of blip in terms of confidence about the style of play, because they're not the same team, they're not performing in the same way, they're not doing the same habits that made them great. And when that starts to happen, it's difficult to get back mid-season.
Yeah, the answer is, can they? Well, yes, they can. Will they? I don't know. A lot of players are not playing well. The midfield, even with the late arrival of Artur, look lightweight. It looks leggy. It looks struggling. They're missing Mane more than I think they imagined they would. We haven't really seen enough of Darwin Núñez yet to see what sort of player he'll be. Salah, I don't think Salah's played particularly well since the since Egypt failed to qualify for the World Cup, if maybe even since the African Nations final defeat, which was a month or so earlier than that. He's not been bad. He's just not been as great as he was before that. And at the back, Alexander-Arnold was having an awful run. And if they had another right back, I think they would be thinking of putting him in. The Liverpool fans, I know, are critical of Robertson. Van Dijk is looking mortal, more than mortal, actually frail at times. And he really struggled once again in Napoli. And they've been bailed out by the keeper quite a bit, more than they want to be. Something is certainly more than awry. There's a real issue there, and it needs to be addressed. And whether that will be something that can be done easily, I'm not too sure. Once players lose legs, lose confidence, lose belief, lose faith, reinstalling that isn't a matter of days. It's a matter of weeks and months sometimes.
Yeah, very interesting to see exactly what happens there. Martin, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
That's Martin Lipton there giving us some thoughts on what's likely to happen over the next while. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It does feel like all the games, apart from the London games, are going to go ahead. And even then, you kind of think they'll be able to make some excuse for, well, we're going to play these ones, but not that one.
Possibly. I just saw the Daily Mail are now reporting that it may not go ahead because they don't have enough TV trucks, Sky, because they're covering so much for the royal funeral. So that's another one that may affect everything. I mean, surely they will find it somewhere.
Ship some TV trucks over from...
Like, there's so much money involved in it. You would think they'll be able to
drive
find
them
it.
through the tunnel, but then they'd get stuck in traffic in Calais. I mean, that'd be slightly ironic, wouldn't it?
It would be slightly ironic. But yeah, I mean, I think it does make sense that a lot of the games will go ahead apart from the London ones, but it's tight fitting it in. I know Martin was saying there about the third and fourth week in January, but even then, if you have to play more than 2 games, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah. It's 8:36 this morning, and let's say hello and good morning to Cathal Mullaney. Cathal, how are you?
Good morning, folks. How's it going?
Good. We're getting hammered in the comments for not giving Shane Lowry enough love because
come on.
I was too busy talking about I mean, I think Patrick Reed and his performance over the weekend was one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen in sport. And then Shane Lowry swatted him away. I did say that.
Yeah.
But you can't please all of the people any of the time, it turns out.
Yeah. It was a great final day, wasn't it? It was great entertainment, and I suppose it got a lot of the limelight because there was no Premier League this weekend, but what a finish. Part of me wanted to see a playoff between McIlroy and Lowry. Wouldn't that have been nice?
Yeah, it would. Just to see it.
Just to see it.
You wouldn't have talked about anything else this morning, I reckon, if that had happened.
Yeah. And you know what? McIlroy made a great effort on the last with that putt. I mean, it was... when he hit it, I thought it was 2 or 3 feet short. And
yeah, me too.
Trundled down there. And he said he thought it was in, 3 feet out, and it just squirmed to the right a little bit on him. But what a great final day. I thought Lowry was pretty much flawless. Okay, his drive on 17 wasn't brilliant, but he recovered well. And then the shot into 18, I mean, that was just sublime into the centre of the green, and got his birdie and got in front. And I suppose he had that target that Ram had set after his 62, which was great playing. And then Lowry just, I suppose he could have had doubts in his head because he's come close in a couple of tournaments this year and hasn't quite got over the line. But yesterday he just really raced home and got a deserved victory. And you know, he's a big time player. He's got his...
He never wins any shitty little small tournaments, does he?
Well, he's won his major, he's won his World Golf Championship. This is the flagship event on the European or DP World Tour at one of the iconic venues. He's played Ryder Cup, he's won an Irish Open as an amateur, so he's he's pretty much done it all at this stage. And yesterday points to the Ryder Cup qualification process as well, so he leads the standings there, and he'll be up the race to Dubai standings as well, heading towards the close of the season. So you're probably looking at a scenario where McIlroy, I think, currently leads the standings in that as well, so he could win both sides of the Atlantic, which would be a super year for him. And he spoke about trying to keep the momentum going from this year heading into next year as well. He views that as fairly important. So still a lot to play for this season, but great to see Lowry back in the winners' enclosure. I think it's 3 years since his last win, which is hard to believe too, because he has been in the mix quite often. But he really is in the upper echelon of players right now.
What world rankings are today? Will they be? Do we know?
Yeah, he's going to shoot up, and he's already shot up in the top 50 this year. I think he's the biggest mover in the top 50. So you're probably looking at Lowry to be on the brink of the top 15, I would think, after that win yesterday. And that's where he should be. He's one of the most talented players in the world, and if you look at his game, it's so natural and free-flowing when he's playing his best. And he spoke himself of just trying to get out of his own way sometimes and just letting himself swing the club freely and putt freely and kind of not overthink it, because he's such a naturally good player. And you know, to win at a venue like Wentworth, where there's been so many great champions over the years, will certainly go down as one of the top achievements of his career.
Did get the sense listening to him yesterday that like there was just a massive relief on his side that he had finally got there. I think after it was 2019 was the last big win he had, so it just seemed like he was absolutely he wasn't even happy yet. He was just relieved that he'd got there and that he hadn't gotten his way again.
Yeah, and it's such a stressful final day as well, because the scoring was so good at Wentworth that you never really were sure that you were far enough ahead if you did get ahead. Now, he made his run at the right time and he got ahead right at the very end, but still, when you have a player of McIlroy's calibre chasing you down, 17 felt like a big turning point where you felt like Lowry not making birdie maybe opened the door a little bit for McIlroy, and McIlroy just pushed his drive a little bit to the right. Now, he did make a decent recovery with the wood shot in under the trees, but didn't get up and down with his pitch. That putt looked in as well on 17. Had that gone in, then you're looking at a playoff with McIlroy making birdie on the last. So that probably felt like the turning point in the back nine. But for Lowry, as you say, Kathleen, I mean, to get over the line is such a relief, because he knows that he's one of the top players in the world. And when you're one of the top players in the world, top 5 finishes don't really cut the mustard. Okay, they're good for continuity and they illustrate that you're consistent in your game and that you're playing well, but really Lowry, like McIlroy, deals in the currency of wins and major championships and big events like yesterday. So to get that on the CV is quite an achievement.
Talk to us a little bit about that then, in terms of like, you know, he again would have turned down a massive amount of money from Live Golf. So clearly he's at this stage, obviously fighting. The money's important, but he's at a stage now where it doesn't really matter. You know, he's going to be wealthy for the rest of his life, no matter what he does. So in terms of legacy, like, how important is it for him to start winning these types of events and over the rest of the season to continue to compete, so that when the majors roll around, he's leaning back on the confidence of what he did at the Open and able to compete on a regular basis? Because he's been thereabouts, and like a few bad final rounds, a few mistakes in final rounds have kind of cost him recently.
Well, the Masters this year he was quite close, and on the PGA Tour he's come close as well. I think you're right. I think he's playing definitely for his legacy now, in terms of establishing himself as one of the leading players in Europe over the years. Winning a major championship instantly elevates you to a certain level that other players just can't quite get to that haven't won a major championship. So he's got that. He's now won the flagship event on the DP World Tour. Maybe are you looking at a stage where Lowry could conceivably try and win a FedEx Cup or a Race to Dubai title, which would underline his consistency across a season? He's certainly in that sort of company, you would think, at this stage. And probably for Lowry, I mean, to become a multiple major champion would be quite an achievable target now, because he's been in the mix quite consistently in big events, and I think he views himself as very capable of mixing it with that sort of company. And he's the sort of player that, I won't say a carefree attitude, but certainly he looks very comfortable when he's under pressure. I would think, when you think of Boardrush and the home crowds and the pressure that was on him that day to deliver, and he did with such poise. Again yesterday, coming down the stretch, I mentioned that shot into 18, I think it was a 5-iron he hit right into the heart of the green, and that's a very difficult shot where the wind can swirl with the grandstands and the trees, and you've got the waterfront left and the pressure obviously of needing to make birdie to edge in front. So he's got all the attributes of being a top player in the world, and probably for him at this stage I would say achievable goals and realistic targets would be A, to win another major championship, and then B, to establish himself probably as one of the top 10 players in the world.
Yeah, over a period of time. Yeah, he did pick up $1.3 million, so I mean, it's not nothing, you know. Obviously it does help.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were struck as well by his comments at the start of the week about the Live Golf players.
Yeah, that is interesting, right? Because he said, people know I hate conflict, and that's true. Like, he definitely does not want to talk about politics at any point, and you know, he would have taken criticism for playing in Saudi Arabia in the past, but was basically like, look, the European Tour have decided this, and I'm a member of the European Tour, and so you know, you can take that or not. But this week he came out fighting and was like, hang on a second, I actually am going to be one of those ones who is supporting McIlroy and has his back, and then I'm also lending my credibility to this. And then he produces some of the best golf of his life.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think a lot of people were struck by his comments at the start of the week that he came out so defiant in his comments, and sometimes that can put pressure on you as well to deliver, but he certainly did in terms of his golf this week. But it probably underlines as well his position within the European game right now, that he's one of the top players and possibly one of the spokespeople for the European game. Obviously, McIlroy has taken the charge on the other side of the Atlantic with his worldwide profile and over in Europe as well. And Lowry certainly is in that company too. And
well, that's it, isn't it? Isn't he now a future Ryder Cup captain? Isn't that what we're looking at? And that's what we're talking about. Like,
yeah,
you know, we had GMAC penciled in at some point. Major winner. You know, somebody who will be very presentable, acceptable to the Americans. What was your American accent and everything? But now it's like Shane Lowry's absolutely going to be a Ryder Cup captain at some point.
Yeah, I think so, and I think he will want to establish himself there as a member of the team consistently over the next number of years, and a leader really. And you know, he does thrive in that team environment, and he spoke of how much he enjoyed his previous experience in the Ryder Cup, even though Europe at the moment don't look terribly strong. But Lowry, with his position in the game now, is certainly one of the stronger players on the European side. When you think of Lowry, McIlroy, Matt Fitzpatrick as a US Open champion are going to be the leading contenders for Europe and flying the flag in Italy next year. And I suppose it's down the line, but Lowry certainly would be in contention to be a Ryder Cup captain at some point now, you would think, given his standing in the game in Europe and indeed worldwide as well.
The world rankings had him at 19. Now, that was on September 11th. So that was, I don't know if that's before or after the tournament yesterday at week 37. So we'll...
Yeah, but I think it's a very realistic goal for him, and I think he would view himself as definitely a top 20 player. And I think most people out there on the circuit would regard him talent-wise as definitely within the top 20 players in the world. And I suppose to stay there, you do need to be registering wins every season, and you need to be contending. He has been contending, just hasn't got over the line. But from yesterday, that's going to give him a huge boost in confidence. And you know, I think it's Shane Lowry. If he can keep this form and retain his form heading into next season, he'd be a very, very keen man to watch for the major championships again, because he's certainly trending in the direction of becoming a multiple major champion at some point.
I know the golf season, it felt like it finished officially a couple of weeks ago, and then this happened, and then obviously you're talking about the road to Dubai. There's loads of massive tournaments still left to go.
Yeah, absolutely, and the race to Dubai now will take centre stage, and I think the Alfred Dunhill Links tournament is coming up. I think McIlroy's going to play in that as well, and I suppose it's Europe's turn now to take a little bit of the limelight heading into the closed season, but then you will have a little bit of a break, and then obviously the turn of the year and everything like that, and then it ramps back up again in February and March and into the Masters again. But I suppose for players of McIlroy and Lowry's calibre, they are always trying to build up towards those major championships, and even though the season isn't over yet, they will have an eye already on their winter plans and trying to prime themselves to peak at Augusta next April. And wouldn't it be great to see one of them slip on the green jacket?
Absolutely. What else happens or is happening?
Well, Pádraig Harrington has another Champions Tour title. He's celebrating again. He claimed victory at the Ascension Charity Classic overnight. He bogeyed 2 of the final 3 holes, but he still finished a shot clear of the field on 14 under par. He actually tried to ring Shane Lowry to talk to him. It was 3:30 in London, Harrington said, and Lowry didn't answer. So he was either gone to bed or he was otherwise engaged. But he was Harrington thought that he'd still be up celebrating his win, but that was how it played out.
I did see Lowry did post a photo about like 40 minutes ago of him looking a bit worse for wear. I think he said he had to be up early this morning for something anyway, so I don't know how late the celebrations went on. Yeah, but Harrington's stitching together a great season on the Champions Tour. He's been really consistent, and his 14 under par total yesterday saw him finish a shot clear of the field. Wai Yang finished in second. On the LPGA Tour, Leona Maguire finished on 6 under par. That was good enough for a 24th place finish at the Kroger Queen City Championship. She was 16 shots adrift of the winner, Ali Ewing of America. Stephanie Meadow finished on 1 over par. Carlos Alcaraz is the youngest male winner of a Grand Slam since Rafa Nadal in 2005. That's after lifting the US Open title last night. He beat Norway's Casper Ruud in the final, winning in 4 sets. 19 years of age, Carlos Alcaraz is also now top of the world rankings. In football last night, Shamrock Rovers 4 points clear now at the top of the SSE Electricity League Premier Division. Neil Farrugia scored twice. The Hoops beat Finn Harps 5-1 at Tallaght Stadium. Harps are rooted to the bottom of the table. They're 1 point behind
at UCD. It's hoped that elite women's football will continue in Galway despite Galway WFC's decision to withdraw from the Women's National League from next season. The tribesmen have confirmed they'll not take part in next year's campaign and that this will be their final season. They posted their thanks to players, staff and fans on social media last night as they bring an end to their association with the league in their current incarnation, but it's understood that there is interest in forming a new team ahead of the 2023 season. Thomas Tuchel says he's devastated his time as Chelsea manager has come to an end. The German was sacked last week. Graham Potter appointed as his successor. In a statement on social media, Tuchel said Chelsea was a club where he felt at home personally and professionally. In rugby, Ireland's men's sevens head coach James Topping says their bronze medal finish at the World Cup is a great boost to the sport. Then 19 points to 14 win over Australia ensured a third place finish after they lost to New Zealand in the semi-finals. Ireland also enjoyed wins over Portugal, England and South Africa at the tournament in Cape Town. On the county final front, Ballygunner celebrating their 9th Waterford senior hurling title in a row. They had too much for Mount Sion in the decider yesterday, winning by 2-11 to 8 points. Peter Hogan and Porrick Mahoney hitting the back of the net there for the All-Ireland Club champions. And finally, news of motorsport. Max Verstappen edging closer to a second consecutive Formula 1 world title. That's after winning the Italian Grand Prix. He came back from 7th on the grid to finish clear of Ferrari's Charles Leclerc to secure his 11th victory of the season and his 5th in a row.
13 is the record, I think Shane was saying last week that he's chasing, so it's really him against the records now as opposed to him against the field. All right, good stuff, Carl. Thanks very much for that.
Thanks, folks.
It's Carl Mullaney with us there this morning at 8:51. A reminder, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're turning our attention to the NFL season, which is finally up and running after what seems like an interminable off-season. Mike Carlson is back with us. Mike, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Well, can you keep the noise down a little bit? It's kind of bright this morning.
A late night?
Yeah, I'd gotten out of the habit of staying up to watch the late game, but now it's back, and yeah, it was a good opening week, like as usual. It's National Jump to Conclusions Week, so
well, let's do that then.
Buffalo and Kansas City will meet in the Super Bowl, even though they're both in the AFC. That's the first conclusion. Also, just before we start, I'd like to point out that Thomas Tuchel, there is a job open at Nebraska.
Oh, yeah.
who fired their coach on Sunday after they lost to Georgia Southern. So the trip to Dublin did Scott Frost no good at all.
Well, it's certainly the Nebraska fans in the aftermath were definitely like, this guy's got to go. And he didn't last. So I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing in future. If it's going to make everybody a little bit anxious about the trip to Dublin in future.
Yeah. I think they had such a good time, they won't matter. They won't care.
Well, the free booze always helps with that.
Absolutely.
It turns out. So a couple of jumping to conclusions. The Green Bay Packers not very good anymore. You know, we can maybe Aaron Rodgers is washed up. Dallas are cursed. Their QB is out. He's hurt his hand, and Jerry Jones immediately comes out and says, right, he's injured and he's going to miss who knows how long. And anyway, do you really come back after a hand injury as a QB in the same season and perform really well? Tom Brady's still good at football. Bill Belichick, what the hell's going on there? And as you said, the two best teams seem to be the two best teams. So did I miss anything significant?
Not really, except maybe the kickers. Kickers were either very, very good or very, very bad. As you might have noticed, the rookie kicker Cade York for Cleveland won the game with a 58-yard kick against Carolina in the Baker Mayfield Bowl, the Baker Bowl. They got a couple penalties with Jacoby Brissett, their quarterback, who put him into field goal range basically, and he kicked that after Baker had kind of come alive in the fourth quarter and set them on. And then you had the kicking hero of last season, McPherson from Cincinnati, miss an extra point that would have won the game in regulation, and then miss a field goal that would have won it in overtime. They had their long snapper, the guy whose job is to simply snap the ball back on kicks, was injured. They had to use a tight end as the long snapper. And you could see the way that the slightly slower, higher snap affected both kicks. The one at the end of regulation was blocked by Minka Fitzpatrick. And Mike Tomlin strutting up the sideline, the coach saying, "Boy, can I coach?" You know? But otherwise, I think you've hit most of the high notes. And
we've talked about Bill Belichick with you over the years. What is happening with the Patriots at the moment? Because we talked briefly about this on the show last week, I think, where they don't have an official offensive coordinator, and that's okay because it's all about money. But actually, I mean, is it actually all just about money when you pick
No, I don't think so. I think it's all about trust. And as Bill gets older, I think he's always brought along lots of young coaches, and that's that seems to be working on their defense. Their defense had a pretty good game against Miami is supposed to be that incredibly high-powered offense now with Tyreek Hill, but offensively they didn't know what they were doing, and when they did know what they were doing the wrong things. It was very hard to watch because last year they performed very well with a rookie quarterback, and this year it looked like Mac Jones was not getting much of a chance to do anything. Their receivers were never open, which means either you don't have great receivers like some teams do, or you're not able to scheme them open. When they needed to be in a hurry, and occasionally when they went hurry up, they performed a little bit better. But when they needed to be in a hurry, they weren't. They were still running the ball on first down and second down, and then throwing, on third down when everyone expects it. Their line looked very slow. Their receivers, they looked like they wanted to play Dan Campbell, Detroit Lions, smash mouth football, but they don't have a DeAndre Swift to carry the ball. And I think I said earlier, I do a column on Patreon. I said much earlier in the over the summer, I didn't understand why he didn't bring in a young quarterbacks coach. Say he didn't have to be the offensive coordinator, but a guy just to work with Mac Jones, just to make suggestions as to what we're doing. When Buffalo lost Brian Dable to the Giants, they promoted Ken Dorsey. They brought in Joe Brady, who had been the coordinator in Carolina and before that at LSU. A guy like that, I thought, would help. Just bring some new blood in. And instead, you've got Patricia and Joe Judge running the offense, both of whom are not just failed head coaches, but failed badly head coaches. Who it was interesting that the Giants won, and their special teams were great, and their special teams were lousy when Joe Judge, who by occupation is a special teams coach, was there. So, if I were an offensive player, I'm not sure how much faith I would have in those guys to create a good offense.
Yeah, okay. Now, there have been seasons where the Patriots start slow and Belichick's giant brain figures things out. So this is Overreaction Monday after the first weekend of the season, so that's okay. They're
absolutely, yeah. The Giants are going to go 17-0.
The Patriots 1-16. What about Green Bay, though? Because, Green Bay They gave away their best offensive weapon. They refused point blank to ever draft a receiver in the first round. They've got a very temperamental and genius quarterback, and they got absolutely annihilated by a divisional rival yesterday.
Well, he's certainly not temperamental while he's drinking ayahuasca tea. He's become one with the universe. But it was the very first play of the game for Green Bay that told you what was going to happen. They ran one of the rookie receivers, Christian Watson, deep. He got open, just as he had done in one of the preseason games I saw. Rodgers put the ball right over his shoulder on the money, and he dropped it. They would have been tied had he caught it and gone in for the touchdown. And the expression on Rodgers' face basically told you all that you needed to do. Now, they didn't have either of their starting tackles playing. So you could see that part of the game plan was for him to kind of get rid of the ball early or move in the pocket and then get rid of the ball. But none of that was working. He also didn't have Alan Lazard, who's supposed to probably be his quote unquote favorite receiver this year. So I'm willing to cut them a little bit of slack there. But you notice the difference in the game really was Justin Jefferson. This is what having a really true number one receiver does for you. Jefferson had 9 catches for 180 something yards, and on both of his touchdowns, on the play that set up a field goal, he was not only open, he was wide open. And how you can let a weapon like that stay open, I have no idea with Green Bay's defense. But you had a guy like Jefferson making plays. A.J. Brown, who went to the Eagles, had a huge game for Philadelphia. Devontae Adams the Raiders lost. And Adams had a pretty good game, but nothing to make Green Bay kind of weep over that loss until they look at their own receivers.
They'll be fine though, because they have the ayahuasca are not influenced QB who is still like I guess we're not saying that there's an end point in sight for Aaron Rodgers just yet.
No, I mean he still looks so good throwing the ball. They just have to. They brought Tom Clements back, who's an old CFL quarterback who was a quarterback's coach in Green Bay and offensive coordinator for a while. And you saw the two of them at one point just sitting on the sidelines, and Rodgers kind of in disgust, complaining to him, I guess, or whatever. I think when they get their tackles back, they'll be better. They can run the ball, which is a good thing for them, but they do need to sort that out.
What about the new Kirk Cousins and the fact that they now have a head coach who wants Kirk Cousins to throw the ball and be influential as opposed to just trying to bore you to death by defense?
Yeah, and their defense was surprisingly good too. Again, without their tackles, Green Bay. But yeah, I mean, it was brilliant to see. Like I said, Jefferson was wide open all the time, and he was being schemed open, and Green Bay was kind of, you could watch as he moved across the formation, the corner on his side was letting him go because it wasn't his job. The safety was sort of letting him go because it probably wasn't his job, and nobody just stopped to look and think, well, that's Justin Jefferson, maybe somebody ought to cover him. But they picked and tore the Green Bay defense apart when they needed to. So yeah, I thought that was a really good sign. And maybe some of the Kirk Cousins doubters will have a tough time this season. It's something that I actually picked the Vikings as a dark horse this week. And in a week that, a lot of upsets, my straight up picks were not doing that well. That was the one that actually pleased me, although, it's always hard to accept a sea change in a division like that. And I doubt it will be that in the end.
Yeah. Okay. We've got to talk about two other quarterbacks.
Sure.
It seems like officially Tom Brady's final season. That was all the stories coming out yesterday, that he'd actually gone on holidays with the family for a 10-day break in the middle of August, which is the first time he's ever been able to do that, which was, his sop to his wife, who famously was like, no, hang on, you're giving up football. And he's like, no, I'm actually going to go back and play one more season. So we'll see how that all plays out. But that was the gossip anyway from the New York Post pre-match.
Yeah.
And
Gisele's the most important person in the NFL right now.
And it looks like this is going to be his last season, but it started okay. They beat the Cowboys 19-3. How did Brady play, and what do we expect from him this season?
I think what we expect is probably another Super Bowl run, and he kind of made the most of what they had. Leonard Fournette, his running back, had a really good game, and they ran him a lot against Dallas. The Cowboys, of course, lost Dak Prescott during the game, which made their offense more problematic. But Brady looked sharp. He was throwing the ball with authority. Mike Evans appears to be his new favorite guy, but Julio Jones they were trying to work into the receiving mix, and that's probably a good sign for them. I think he looks fine. I don't think they'll have a problem. The offensive line held up pretty well. Micah Parsons got a couple of sacks, but Micah Parsons is Micah Parsons, and I think Tampa will be there in the end in the NFC. In fact, I'm trying to think of whether I had Tampa and Green Bay, I think, in the NFC Championship, and to Green Bay winning based on National Jump to Conclusions Week, I'd have Tampa winning that game right now. The Rams, of course, lost to Buffalo on Thursday, so they're now eliminated for the season.
Yeah, as are the San Francisco 49ers, who's...
were they awful?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but yeah, I mean, in conditions that you wouldn't play a Division III football match in, it was pretty awful at Soldier Field. But they just couldn't put an offense together, and it could be Jimmy G time sooner rather than later in San Francisco. Trey Lance showed some good things, but when they lost Elijah Mitchell at running back, their whole offense kind of collapsed. They almost would have to move Deebo Samuel to full-time running back, and that would be a bad thing for them to do.
But Mike, Kyle Shanahan is the greatest football genius that has ever walked the planet. So why is it that everybody who uses his offense seems to be more successful using his offense than the creator and originator of the offense itself?
That's a very good question, which might be answered by the fact that, like many geniuses, he has too much faith in his own genius. Which is the whole Trey Lance situation. They fell in love with Trey Lance. Originally, they were, he wasn't even the guy that they had. I think it was Mac Jones who originally they had their eye on, and they traded up to make sure they could get the quarterback they want in that draft. And then he watched Trey Lance and fell in love with his talent, which is, he's got a lot of potential. Things fell apart from there. The Niners, I think they looked good enough defensively against a team, where Chicago's main offense comes when Justin Fields can make plays that are in broken breakdown situations. So I think they'll be okay there, but they're going to have to put that offense together and hope that everybody stays healthy, which is, in past couple of years, they've had a lot of trouble with that.
That is the great lottery across the whole of the league. Dak Prescott was supposed to have an amazing season this year, but he's going to be out now for heaven knows how long. And also the Cowboys kind of stunk in that game. Either way, they do have injury problems. What is their offense? Who are their offensive stars going to be?
Yeah, and their line is a mess now, of course, with Tyron Smith going out, and then they signed Jason Peters, to kind of last minute 40-year-old injury prone replacement. A great tackle when he's healthy, even at 40, but that's not really going to work. And Zeke Elliott and Pollard didn't do very much, but I think that's partly a factor of the line. And the Giants won, as we said, and Saquon Barkley looked like the Saquon Barkley of old. So that may be a very positive sign for them. I also like the idea that a coach with a minute left in the game, extra point for the tie, 2-point conversion for the win, goes for the win. I just think that's so refreshing when coaches play to win and don't play not to lose. And they got rewarded because Randy Bullock missed a field goal that could have won it for Tennessee. Randy Bullock looks kind of like the guy that you're sitting next to in the pub, and someone says, "Randy, you got to kick a field goal." And he says, "Just a second," and he fires down the shot and the beer, and then goes off onto the field. I think that was really good for the Giants. I like the fact that daring to win paid off for them.
Yeah, for a team who were supposed to be a complete joke, they all of a sudden are up and running and have a little bit of hype about them. The contract that the Ravens were supposed to do with Lamar Jackson didn't get done, and he is representing himself, which is very unusual. He seems to have turned down $250 million because it wasn't fully guaranteed at the time of signing. So this season is going to be one of those seasons where we watch a player back himself for the greatest riches that we've ever seen in potentially in any team sport, because if he backs himself and wins, then whoever he plays for will have to pay him. Now, more than likely they'll franchise tag him and have to pay him $50 million next year, and he'll be happy enough with that. But or maybe he'll refuse to play, I don't know. But he started the season pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, their first drive or whatever, he didn't start very well, and I tweeted out, every time he throws an incompletion, it's like $10 million go down off the deal. But then he came around and looked very good. And Devin Duvernay, who they've been waiting to sort of step up for a couple of years, stepped up with a couple of great catches for him as well. I think one of the things that really bothers me is how a lot of Twitter and columnists and stuff try to psychoanalyze people they don't know. Oh, well, he didn't get his contract, he's not going to play. He's going to just take it easy or something like that. It's exactly the opposite, I think. It's what you said. He's basically betting on himself, and he's going to show everybody how good he is. And the sad part is that teams are held to ransom in the salary cap era by the dumbest owner around. So the owner who's willing to sign a guy who's, facing a year-long suspension and give him a fully guaranteed contract, or the one who's willing to cave to Kyler Murray's temper tantrums over the summer and give him a huge contract. Now Lamar Jackson wants some of that, and quite justifiably. And I think the franchise tag is probably the most logical thing, because I think Baltimore, who are not generally a big spending team, they tend to sign their guys to longer term contracts and put the money up front so that they can get them for a slightly cheaper annual rate. I'm not sure that's going to fly with Lamar, but I'm also not convinced that Baltimore will worry that much about it. They may be in a situation where they can't get around it, but Lamar Jackson's such a special talent that you almost have to mold your offense around him. And I'm not sure there will a lot of teams that are going to be willing to make that kind of a change if that's what it comes to. I think, what we saw was going to be Baltimore at its best. Now it was against the Jets, so take it with a large grain of salt. And Joe Flacco was the quarterback on the other side, which gave it a little extra pinch of pepper as well. I think Lamar is going to have a good season unless he gets hurt. And this is the thing. A guy who's asking for a fully guaranteed contract is coming off a season where he missed half the season through injury, in a sport where most teams tend to protect their quarterbacks from injury, but Baltimore is willing to let him run with the ball and risk it again. Yeah.
No, it's all fair points. Mike, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, Jeff.
It's Mike Carlson giving us some thoughts on the NFL season, which is up and running after the first weekend of games. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Conor McKeown and Clean O'Connor were on the pay-per-view. Here they are talking about, with Joe yesterday, about Graham Potter's coaching style. We have tennis next.
This is interesting. So all this stuff about holistic coaching, it is everywhere in coach education, coach development now at the minute. I was at something in Sport Ireland last week. It was all about how to look after the person. It was about trauma in sport and trauma-informed environments, and how you as coaches basically look after people. And someone at that made a very good point, and they were saying, if our world is about high performance, how can you possibly expect somebody to be performing at their best if at a personal level we're not minding them, or they're not in their optimum space. And we can throw all the technical, tactical, sports science stuff at them we want, but if that piece fundamentally isn't right, they'll never ever get to what their highest performance could be. So it is absolutely out there in coach education at the minute, and coach development and everything about it. However, it always comes back to the same thing. You thought maybe in 6 months' time Potter will be gone, because when you're in those situations, you have to be. There are times when you're making decisions between what is the immediate thing, the immediate match at the weekend, the immediate championship, versus what I know is better long term, and how much time am I willing to wait? Because Potter's style is all about relationships. It's all about trust. You don't do that in 50 days. So then it's the decision makers. Are they actually true to their word? Are they really meaningful, or when will their patience run out? And if a player is difficult, but Potter is saying, no, I think we can. This will get somewhere eventually. Are they going to believe him? Are they not? So everybody's talking about it, but some people have more patience for it than others, because it's not an easy way nor a quick way,
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports Rugby.
Far from everyone thinks that I'm the best that plays.
Give or take. That's kind of that's how you're defined, that's how you're remembered, that's how you're regarded. That's you're kind of happy enough that's how you're known forevermore?
No, I prefer to be second or third.
Of course.
Subscribe to the Rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves? Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
Celebrate European Week of Sport this September at the Be Active Festival. An action-packed day out for the whole family at Sport Ireland Campus, Blanchardstown. Come and try new sports, fitness challenges and skill tests at Ireland's biggest sporting festival. Meet sporting legends. Check out the Inflatable Zone, Village Food Market and much more. There's something for everyone at the Be Active Festival. Saturday, September 24th at Sport Ireland Campus, Blanchardstown. Book your tickets now at beactivefestival.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, Jenny Claffey is with us to talk tennis. The full unveiling of new superstars, kind of as we predicted at the start of the tournament. Alcaraz, he the man, and Swiatek, she the woman.
Yes, they are definitely the two stars of the future of the tennis game. Exciting to see two new names and big stars winning the title, and quite convincingly winning the title, both of them. We saw obviously Alcaraz had a relatively not easy match against Ruud, but he had much tougher matches in the rounds before that. But we've been talking about him for a while now, and he is going to be the star of the men's game. Swiatek, we know a little bit more about. This is her third Grand Slam, so we know that, and she's the world number one, so we know that she has the potential. But these are going to be the names and lights for the next few years, definitely.
Alcaraz came through 3 5-setters before the final, which is it's great for prime time, everybody getting to know him. It's good for the brand. It's an amazing way to win, to come through those.
Yeah, to have those tough matches definitely shows his character, and his grit and his strength, his resilience to win 3 back-to-back 5-setters. And he played all of his matches on Ash, on that centre court, and he played under the lights as well. So he was playing his last match against TFO until 3 o'clock in the morning or something, and then had to try and recover with the day only between that and the final. I mean, he's something else, this guy. He's a special player.
It's like the sport knew that they needed to turn him into a superstar, so they're like, look, we're just going to make sure that you're scheduled for the peak viewing hours. Well, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning isn't peak viewing hours. Everybody giving up on it at that stage. But what is it about his game that makes him so set for the hard courts? What is his talent set compared to kind of some of the other greats?
Well, just his game in general on any surface. But it's hard to fault him. He's got this sheer power that he can play with his forehand and his serve. He can really just create this amazing racket head speed through his shots. His backhand is very solid. Comparing him to Ruud last night in the final, he was much more solid off the backhand side than Ruud. He's able to play with drop shots. He serves in volleys. He serves in volleys at the most random times. It's amazing that he has this, his tactical awareness. Unlike any other player that we've seen, he kind of can compare him a little bit more to Roger Federer as opposed to Nadal, even though he is Spanish.
Right.
On the hard court, the way it suits his game, because he can be a little bit more aggressive, and he plays very aggressively, and he doesn't let his opponents in. He's up on top of that baseline, playing real aggressive game style. And
where does the game evolve for him then? Because obviously, we look back at the 19-year-olds. We were talking earlier. Sampras, similar age when he won, but the 19-year-old Rafa versus the 30-year-old Rafa, or even the 19-year-old Roger Federer versus the 27-year-old Federer. So there's much more still to come.
Yeah, his coach Juan Carlos Ferrer was saying that he feels like he's only at 60% of his ability at the moment. So that's kind of a scary thought. He's only 19. He's already the world number one, and he's won a Grand Slam. What is the future going to hold for him? I think in looking at his game overall, he needs to improve a little bit his return of serve. I think his serve in general could actually improve as well. He plays kind of percentage serve, so he doesn't go for the lines as much or go for as much power as you might see some of the other players. He uses the body serve very effectively because he can back that up with his massive forehand. And I think, his kind of maturity on the court, tactically, he could improve and structure his points a little bit better, because he can't always be that showman and play those 5-set matches. That's just not going to be.
Well, I was going to say, the athleticism is obviously there as well at the moment, that allows him to do that. What kind of a challenge did Ruud put up for him?
Not really a huge one. I thought, like, if you look at the sets, like the first set, he wasn't really challenged at all, Alcaraz, by Ruud. He broke serve relatively early on, then just held his serve quite easily. He kind of had a bit of a blip in the second set, Alcaraz. He switched off mentally. He looked maybe a little bit tired, as we mentioned. You know, he played 3 5-set matches late into the night, and that kind of showed in that second set, but he got it back together in the third. Ruud has chances in the third set. He had 2-set points, so it could have been a different match, but I think Alcaraz always had it in him that he was going to win this match, and it looked like he was the likely winner the whole time.
We were also talking about this a bit earlier on about the Wimbledon situation, and neither of these two, Swiatek or Alcaraz, were super competitive. I think Alcaraz was okay in the early rounds, but never quite reached the situation where we thought he was going to win it. Was there anything behind that? Was it just like they're better hardcore players at the moment in their careers?
Well, the grass is always a tricky transition for the players. You know, coming from clay court onto the grass court, it's always very different. It plays a lot faster than a clay court does. The points are a lot quicker. Alcaraz just couldn't get his footing right. It seemed his footwork right, and that's such a big part of his game. He moves unbelievably well. He's probably one of the best movers in the game. And as you mentioned, athleticism, it just didn't come to form in Wimbledon. And then Swiatek, yeah, she didn't have a great Wimbledon either. Again, she was saying that the surface was a bit of an issue for her, and again, she's an amazing mover. She wasn't able to get into the match with her footwork and into position that she needed to. I think on the hard court, though, that transition, Alcaraz definitely suits the hard court even more than Swiatek's game does, whereas Swiatek is definitely more of a clay court kind of a player, where she likes to build up the points and then takes her time and then pulls the trigger and goes for the winner, whereas Alcaraz plays hot tennis from the very first shot of the rally.
For just a question about Ruud, for what does he need to do now? Because obviously we've seen him in 2 Grand Slam finals, both of them not been all that impressive, and it seems to be he goes on a run, gets to that point, and then just slips off. Is it an experience thing? Is it a mentality thing? Or is it just that his game isn't at the same level as some of the other players?
Yeah, tough 2 losses for him this year. I mean, the first one against Nadal, nobody had Ruud as the favourite, whereas last night he went into that match, we could say 50-50, the chances for him to win it. He had been there before, so he had the experience there, but I think it's his game maybe faltered a little bit in those 2 finals, especially looking at last night's one. His backhand let him down a little bit. He wasn't serving as well as he could. Like in the first set, he had less than 50% for a serve, which is really poor in the men's side. Like, they need to be serving well and up in the 70s, to be holding serve. So I think there may be, and not necessarily a belief. I don't think it's necessarily a belief, because he really did think he was going to win that last night. So I think it does come back to his game and the way he structures, the way he tactically his points, trying to play on that forehand a lot becomes very predictable for players. So players are able to read how he's going to play. I think they're going to have to go back to the drawing room and improve a few things, as I mentioned, the backhand and his serve as well.
So who is most likely to emerge from that group to be Alcaraz's main challenger over the next while? It doesn't sound like you think Ruud is ahead of, say, is it Sinner or any of those other guys?
I think, yeah, like the likes of Sinner and Rublev, if they make a few adjustments to their games, they could be, and Zverev, as we know him, and Thiem, who's injured at the moment. Like, those guys, we've been talking about them as being the next gen, and then Alcaraz just came kind of out of nowhere last year, and he's now the next hot shot. I think, yeah, some of the guys are going to have to adjust their games to play against the likes of Alcaraz, because Alcaraz can just do anything from anywhere on the court.
So it does sound like you think he can be competitive on grass at Wimbledon. It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, definitely. I think he'd only played like 3 matches or 3 tournaments on grass ever before Wimbledon this year. So I think he just needs experience. I mean, as we said, he's only 19. But also, on that note, I'd love to see Djokovic and Alcaraz playing over the next 2 or 3 years, when Djokovic, if he gets back to playing the tournament.
Is he going to be able to play Australia?
Not based on this year's.
And maybe not America next year either. So it's literally only France and Wimbledon.
Yeah, and then even at the Masters tournaments and whatnot, I'd love to see them competing, because I think that's going to give Djokovic a bit of fire in his belly, like that he's not done yet, and Alcaraz is the next up and coming. So there'll be some spicy matches, I think.
And Nadal's injuries, we were chatting about this too earlier. If, like, you would expect, if he is going to be competitive, it'll be in Australia, and then really it'll be in Paris next year.
Yeah, I reckon he's going to have a layoff now for the winter season, and maybe not compete too much in the hard court this kind of time, up and coming time, and leave his competitive matches until Australia. And as you said, the French Open, I think with the injuries he's had, and his wife's expecting a baby, his priorities may shift over the coming months, years. So hopefully this is not the end for Nadal, but I still think he'll remain competitive, but he just won't be featuring a huge amount.
Okay, what kind of a tournament did Swiatek have? I'm just looking here. She dropped a couple of sets, but was never really in danger of losing any matches.
She had a very kind of ropey start to the US Open. She came in with not great form. I think her best result since winning the French Open in May was a quarter-final. So she hasn't got much form coming into the US Open, and she didn't look comfortable, I felt, in the first few rounds in the US Open. She doesn't really like New York. She was saying that she doesn't like the noise and the buzz that it creates there. She was giving out about the balls.
What?
I know. Yeah, the men and women play with different balls.
That's crazy. That does sound ridiculous.
That is, yeah, that's crazy. But so she was kind of giving out about that. But she played 2 tournaments before the US Open to get used to that. So I mean, that shouldn't really be an issue, other than the bigger issue of them playing with different balls. And then she got challenged. She had, like I said, 2-3 set matches coming into this final. Her semi-final, she was challenged by Sabalenka. She was 4-2 down in the 3rd set.
Okay, right.
So she turned that one around, which was a big deal. And also, she came from the 2 matches. She was in 3 sets. She lost the first set. It's a great sign of a champion that she's able to figure it out and find a way to win those matches. And we saw her play her best match, I think, in the final against Jabeur. She just was a different player to the player we saw for the previous 2 weeks, playing very aggressively from the very get-go. Like, she won the first 3 games in 8 minutes. It's just phenomenal stuff. But amazing for her to be able to win, having not played her best throughout the tournament.
So the ceiling for her with the 3 Grand Slams won at the age of 21 is obviously, anything is possible. She could go on and dominate the sport. But we've also seen people who get that successful early struggle a little bit over the last number of years in particular. Is that because the pressure to be the next Serena is so great? Like, we were trying to speculate earlier on about how the 3 lads together seem to drive each other on.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems to have been kind of, everybody's been slightly under the shadow of Serena in the women's game. So you reach a high, you get put up on a pedestal, and then it's very difficult to maintain that. I mean, these are obviously pop psychology theories here. Yeah. So either indulge them or shoot them down. Yeah,
well, I think with Swiatek, she has shown that she is dominant as the world number 1. She's backed up a Grand Slam win this year, which, that is a sign of a champion. And that's the first time that's happened in the last 6 years in the women's game. So you can see there's been such a topsy-turvy sign in the women's game over the last few years since Williams has kind of not been dominating. I think it's going to take a few years, and it has obviously in the last few years taken a few years for us to get that champion. I think Swiatek is going to be that, and she's going to remain in that pole position. She's not going to be challenged. I don't think she's going to be challenged a huge amount next year. Maybe by Jabeur, maybe by Rybakina, who won Wimbledon this year. Those hard hitters, but she's able to play against any game style, so she's able to figure it out in the moment. And it's something that she alluded to in her press conferences during the tournament, was that she felt like she was very proud of herself because she was able to work it out on the match court against the different game styles, and when she had her back against the wall. So she's really showing her dominance, I think, this year by backing that up.
In terms of the footwork that you were talking about a little bit earlier on around Wimbledon, is that teachable? I mean, obviously it's teachable, but how teachable is it, I guess?
The footwork for her in general? No,
just specifically the things that she needs to get better at to be someone who could maybe do a Grand Slam.
The calendar slam. Yeah, that's just more time on the grass court. I think she didn't, after the French Open last year, she didn't play in any tournament before Wimbledon, so she had no practice.
Right.
So it's going to just take some time, playing some of those run-up tournaments before Wimbledon, or just getting a little bit more time on the grass.
And is that like sitting down at the start of the year and mapping out your course and deciding actually something ridiculous like trying to do the calendar slam? I can do that now because I'm she has that. Like, she has the. Is there a freedom that comes from being as successful as she is now at this age that will allow her to maybe not just show up at random tournament to win it for whatever, points or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, there's always going to be the expectation that she's going to put on herself, but also that others will put on herself, being the world number 1, that she's going to turn up and win those tournaments. But yeah, they normally lay out their tournament schedule at the start of the year, and if she thinks she could win the calendar slam, will try and pick the tournaments, pick and choose, basically.
Yeah,
because
it seems like an oversight now, in retrospect, not to have played at Eastbourne or somewhere before Wimbledon.
Birmingham, yeah. Now that we look back, hindsight, but looking forward, if she wants to win Wimbledon, she may have to play on those tournaments, like as you mentioned, Bournemouth or Birmingham, those tournaments that are before Wimbledon, just to get a bit more time. But then if she wins the French Open, those tournaments are straight after that. So there's that question of, do we take a bit of time off, or do you go straight into that grass court season?
Yeah. And look, maybe it's ridiculous. Maybe she'll win 2 majors every year, and one of them won't be Wimbledon, and she'll have an amazing career at the end where she looks back and goes, I won 20 majors, you know.
I still think she'll win in Wimbledon. I think her dominance is there to win all 4 on any surface. She can play on any surface. We all in the beginning were saying, she had this amazing match streak on clay courts, but then could she convert that to the hard courts, which plays much faster? And she just shown she can. So in Australia is on hard court as well, so it'll be interesting to see who's going to put it up to her in Australia.
What's the rest of the season like for these guys now? Is it...
There's a bit of a layoff now, and then they go into the winter indoor hardcourt season, and then they have the finals championships at the end of the year where the top 8 players come together and play against each other. So we'll see then who ends up as the number one.
That's basically a money fight, right?
Completely, yeah. Yeah.
I often wonder, like, as an aficionado, as someone who understands the level of tennis being played, do they reach the same levels in those competitions as they do in the majors? Are they playing as well?
It's always hard to compare to the Grand Slams, because that is where it's at, and that's what you're remembered for as a tennis player, is the Grand Slam wins. And you've seen over the years, like, players winning those end of year tournaments and nobody really remembers them for it. Yeah, as you said, it's almost a little bit more exhibition like those tournaments, as opposed to the Grand Slams, which is, as I said, where it really counts.
Yeah.
So do
they hit the ball as hard?
They still go out and play.
Do they chase it down as hard?
Of course they do. Like, I mean, yeah, that's in you as an athlete to win. You know, that will to win, you can't turn that off. But there may be even more trick shots played and whatnot. Yeah. I'm saying that, but that's not necessarily the case. They all want to win. There's a lot of money on the line.
Yeah. So the motivation is similar, and the standard is the same, so we should tune in.
Yes, absolutely, definitely, yes.
All right, well, that makes sense. So all in all, not a bad tennis season.
No, we've seen a lot of highs and lows, and the guard is changing in the men's game now, so it's exciting for the future of tennis.
Yeah, well, because if you think about, like, the last 2 weeks in the build-up were completely overshadowed by the fact that in Vogue, Serena was like, okay, I'm done, officially it's over, and now it's kind of like, well, okay, fair enough. We kind of knew you were finished anyway.
Yeah,
so
that was it.
Yeah, and if none of the other 3 in the men's were to ever win a Grand Slam again, we've had a good time.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of
say goodbye to them too.
Would you think so?
I think so, yeah.
I don't think it's the end though.
Well, I'd love to see Alcaraz smash Djokovic a couple of times over the next couple of years.
So would I.
There you go. I think we'd all pay for that.
Yeah.
On that note, Jenny, thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.
It's some tennis from Jenny Claffey there this morning. It's 9:30. A reminder what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio for you today. Colin Cooper at 1 o'clock is OTB Gold. Splonk is live from 3. Our Classic Game Club is France versus Ireland in the Rugby in 2006. Is it 2006? Are we sure? Okay. Jason Sherlock is our 6 o'clock OTB Gold. You can follow us across all our social channels, subscribe to YouTube, and make sure to download the Sports app for the very latest content and analysis. We're brought to you live each morning, as I said, by Gillette Labs. Tomorrow morning, myself and Shane will be joined by Derek McGrath, Grania McElwain and Stephanie Roach. It's a Monaghan special for you. Right now, though, we're going to leave you with a great piece from yesterday with Kenny Cunningham and Brian Kerr. Enjoy. See you tomorrow.
Brian Kerr and Kenny Cunningham are here in studio. In effect, what happened here is the lads were booked to do Premier League commentaries, and then, well, you know what happened. And so we rang them and said, we know you're available, so you have to come in. And here you are.
I couldn't
Kenny,
think of an
great
excuse.
To see you.
I couldn't think of an excuse when he put it on me toes.
Well, there was nothing on the telly today. I watched a bit of rugby early this morning, the Sevens match.
Oh, yeah.
But there wasn't an awful lot else, unless you want to watch 8 very slow holes of golf. Which wasn't really getting going when I left to come here, Joe. Anyway, so there you go.
The cupboard was bare. Basically, the cupboard was bare. It was either this or hanging out the washing with me ma or something like that in the house.
Well, I caught a little bit of German stuff yesterday and so on, but it was a sad day when there wasn't a match from England on the television at all. It's a strange one. Strange one.
53106, we're here, we're live. The lads are here for the next hour. Fire in any texts or questions and we'll get to them. Obviously, a very busy week in football to discuss. It did strike me, because often when Kenny's in, we ask him questions about things he doesn't want to talk about. And he's like, jeez, why are we talking about this? You know, Saipan, that kind of stuff. No, I'm not talking about this.
All right.
The negativity, you know. And I thought we had the opportunity to actually tell a nice story, which is international manager having to pick a captain, and he decides Kenny Cunningham is the man.
Oh, is that it? Is that where you're leading with this? Yeah. Oh, gee. Let's talk about Saipan ahead of that.
I knew you wouldn't want to talk about this.
Come up with.
Yeah. I want to hear Kenny Cunningham captain.
I shouldn't be. You should be asking him that question with me, not in the room.
No, I think it's nice to get the memory.
No, that's rubbish.
We just
Can I do a saipan on that one?
Let's talk about the lady sevens. Let's talk about the rugby sevens this morning.
It was the men's sevens this morning. Women were beaten yesterday. They had a playoff or whatever. 7th and 8th.
Come on. Let's talk about that top that you're wearing, to be honest with you. That rugby top you've got on there. Looks like, is that a Leinster?
It's just a top.
Leisure.
Is the rugby coming around again, is it?
Green.
Is it?
You stop changing the subject for a second.
Again,
we're going to make you blush for a second.
Let's skip on. You didn't ask a question.
Do we go there?
You didn't ask a question, did you?
It's a while ago. How did we go there? How did that happen? I
don't even know what your question is. I can't even remember.
I think the question was, how did he end up as a captain of the international team? Is it?
Will you be quiet for a second?
He was stuck with me. That was it when he walked in the door.
Was he not?
There would have been more as if he'd have taken that armband off me.
Was he not the captain before I was there? Like, I think he may have already been in position. But you know, the one, I suppose there was an issue around. Roy had been the captain before Saipan. Who was actually the captain when you were playing? In
Staunton.
In Staunton was
Sam, wouldn't have been, yeah.
Would have been Staunton.
Sam stepped up, didn't he? Yeah.
Okay. So then,
were you captain for the Russia away trip and the new regime?
Yeah, Joe. I wish you had prepped us on this. Only 20 odd years ago.
Russia and Switzerland. No, it's not even that far. Russia and Switzerland, the 2 games in the group. You probably were the captain. So all I was doing.
Yeah, we lost both. Yeah, probably was. We lost both.
Yeah. So if that was the case, there was no issue for me then. I didn't have any problem. I did have it.
Was never a big.
I did have a discussion with Roy about it. You know, when I went to meet Roy, and I had the thing about the captaincy about. You know, my image of what I liked from the captain was obviously positionally. I never liked the idea of people having the centre forward as captain unless he was Maradona, you know, or that ilk of player who could control the whole game and win you the game if the other 10 weren't very good. I liked always to have someone. I didn't like the idea of the goalkeeper being the captain either. I always liked it to be someone in the back 4 or a central midfield player who could affect the game at both ends of the pitch and affect the players around them by leading by example, but also by giving information maybe. So I didn't see it, but you know, I also had the thing about having to turn up like as well. You know, you'd like the captain to be there for all the matches as well, whether he was playing or not playing. And so
I never felt like I thought it was different international football and club football in terms of role. A captain never felt there was such an issue at international level. I played at clubs and been in dressing rooms. You got young players, young lads in the dressing room where you think it's important. That figure is actually important. You know, young lads look towards them and look for a little bit of leadership or whatever else. But playing at elite level football, international football. For me, it wasn't a huge issue. I never felt that was a real issue around the dressing room. Brian could have easily thrown a dozen names on the table. You know, he could have been equally as happy with any one of those players. Like, could have had just as much an influence as I had. So, yeah, for me, like, it was a great honour to captain the country. But I was very conscious of the fact that any number of people in that dressing room could have stepped up. You know,
well, he'd be too, you know, he wouldn't be inclined to blow his trumpet. But for me, it was easy. I used to travel with the team as the technical director fairly for a good while, until probably not too long before I became the senior manager. I was technical director. So in that position, I was kind of allowed or asked to want to travel with the team to watch matches away from home. So when you're part of that, you get a chance to observe people and observe people's behaviour in the general scene. I wasn't in the dressing room or anything like that, but I was around close enough to it. And I would have seen the lads. They'd have seen me. A lot of them wouldn't have known me too well, except the ones that played in the underage teams. Kenny wouldn't have known me. I wouldn't have known him too well either, but I knew of his career. I knew he'd played with Tuchel Rovers as a schoolboy and all that. And I would have just observed and I didn't see any way. I knew he was, it'll embarrass him now. I knew he was highly respected by the other players on the pitch, organisationally, and off the pitch. And I knew I could rely on him as a fella who would have good standards about. And if I chose to say, look, the lads we go out maybe for a meal, and I'd say the lads can go out after, and I'd ask what time would you think would be reasonable for to have them back, and he'd tell me a time, and I'd say, right, fine, batter away. And I knew that would be implemented as well as it possibly could, that one person could have an impact and an influence on that. And that was kind of important. But obviously in the game, the reading of the game, and I'd always, like sometimes now, I'd walk with Richard Dunn, or I'd walk occasionally with Kenny. I don't know, I can't remember us doing anything for a good while together. But when it comes to talking about centre-backs and positioning, I don't always feel... I know what I want. I have a clear head about what I like about the centre-halves, and the game is changing and how the game is now. But even at that time, I had a clear picture. But I never tried to, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, I never tried to tell them how to play centre-half. Right. And I could trust people and say, and have a few words. I don't know what his memory of it is, but I'm sure I used to have a few words now and again about the opposition and say, how do you think we go, and how far up, and when we have it from the back, this is how we play it. And that was it. I left it to the captain to...
And he was designated driver on the nights out as well. He was getting them home.
Yeah. Well, it was hard. I don't think he had a licence for the bus though. So he might have been. I don't think he had a bus. Sometimes they went out in the bus, but they didn't come back in the bus.
I noticed at the end of the nights out, towards the end, a few of the lads would be leaning towards him, be doing a man-to-man job with me around the pub, and I was using, what's going on here? But of course, you were thinking, right, I'm going to be the first in the back of the car, in the back of his car, on the way back to the hotel. Yeah. So they'll be guaranteeing their seats.
The other fellas trying to get you to go back to the hotel, so they didn't have to go back as early with you, I'd say, as well. But
but that was never. I must admit, that was all of the lads there were very much on the say kind of similar level. I'm not talking in terms of football ability there, but just in terms of nice, healthy respect for each other and comfortable enough in our own company that who was wearing the armband, there was never an issue. Ego never came into it. I was at football clubs and that armband got tossed around. There'd be absolute killings and people would be, in the background, there'd be kind of... knife in the back job, like, you know what I mean? I want that armband. But that was never an issue around the squad. When somebody got the armband, everybody else was as proud as punch and kind of supporting them as best they could, like, So that's what I'm saying. That's why I say I wouldn't want to demean the role of the captain, but I never felt it was a real issue at that environment, that elite environment, the quality of players that you have around you. For me, was it certainly wasn't never a talking point amongst the players themselves.
No problem. Well, look, we don't have to labour the point. I was just bringing it up so Brian could say something nice about you.
Did you bring it up?
I'm happy you did, Joe, because he was a great captain. He was a smashing captain of the team, and I think we did all right together. I don't know whether I certainly respected his authority among the lads and his view on the game, which I still kind of see it the same way. I think he has a great view on the game in general and its intricacies.
Well, I want to ask you about the week that's been, because it's been interesting, but a few texts in on 53106, people asking a question or two. Two good ones I see here, right? As manager, so that's more for you. Opposition player that impressed you the most in a game?
Well, look, when I was manager, I made the point of hustling the FAI to get better games, and I've given a long answer to this, because then when I came in, my first game was away to Scotland, that was all right, but then they had friendlies lined up against, I think, Canada and Norway and a few more like that, and I went, why are we playing these things? And I knew why, because they didn't hustle for the games. They waited till the invitations come into the FAI and then say, OK, we'll take that game because that's the game we're offering for that day. Whereas Muggins here decided, I want us to play better teams and, test ourselves better, and the crowds will be into it. So we did play good games, and we played a lot of good friendly games, and the likes of Portugal with Ronaldo playing, the Portuguese Ronaldo obviously, but we played Brazil. Yeah. We went to the Netherlands and won 1-0 one Saturday before they went to the Euros. But we played Croatia, who had been toured the World Cup, and we played Brazil, which was a magnificent game, and the quality they had, and they had Ronaldinho, the original Ronaldo, and Kaká, and Roberto Carlos and Cathal, and they were superb. But I think most of all, I got a match. Well, I didn't get the match, but I bumped into Lippy, literally in the lift at a conference, a UEFA conference somewhere. And, he didn't have much English at all, but he got the message. I said, look, will you come and play us in Dublin, you, world champions? And he went, and I said, we'll ask you, I'll get them to write the official letter, and hence we got Italy. And before the World Cup, right? And what I remember was Pirlo, because I took a bit of a chance. I was trying to change it slightly and start us playing 4-3-3, because we were a 4-2-4 team, really. I said 4-2-4 because generally it was Damien on one wing and Andy Reid on the other wing, and Clinton and Robbie when we had our best 11 available. But we were a 4-4-2, and when we hadn't got it, one of the fronts dropped off and helped us in the middle of the field, all that stuff. Yeah. Anyway, we played Italy, and I, in my head, was kind of thinking it's getting harder to survive with the two central midfield players, and more about getting the wide lads in and getting narrowed up in midfield, which with the underage teams I'd always tried to play tighter 4-3-3 with a tightish midfield. Sometimes I used to play a 4 with one winger and three tight, right? And then the full back on that side would have to get a bit of help off the front player. Anyway, that tactical. So with the senior team, I had it in my head that we're going to go this way. We played 4-3-3, and against Italy, I just remember Pirlo picking her up out the back four, and no one out of the three was getting near him, and he just had the ball all the time, and I think we were 2-0 down, and it was the first time since I've been manager that someone was outplaying us, and I'm going, I had to do something here. Anyway, we got a goal back, and I think I changed it and just went a bit narrow and went back to how we played before, and maybe asked Clinton to drop off and pick up Pirlo and stop him getting, and not worry about their back players as much as the midfield. But he was sensational, and as it went on, funny enough, when I was in the Faroes, we played Italy twice as well, and I saw Pirlo up close again, and it was a different kettle of fish with the Faroes trying to get someone to drop in on Pirlo. But he was the most impressive player, individual, just that skill, the range of pass and the ability to take it no matter how tight anyone was to him and so on. But there was lots of matches. I loved things about the opposition and respected it, but I loved that. I loved our own thing about being able to deal with that. And that's what I said, the Brazil match in particular, I remember showing the lads the system that Brazil played, which was basically a kind of a goalkeeper, obviously, and then they played two centre-backs, two just in front of them, two behind the front. Now you talk about a box of four in midfield. They had a box of four and the two front fellas. And then they just had, the width came from Roberto Carlos and Carl, that right? Up and down. And I showing the lads this, but showing the individuals as well was interesting, and saying, well, here's how we might deal with this. It was a friendly game, but it was a great game, wasn't it? Do you remember?
I remember, I think we spoke about that before. The Brazil game there, Lansdowne, fantastic.
I never had as many requests for tickets in any match in my whole life.
I was at it.
As I had for that game and the build-up to that game and the game itself. And I remember their demeanour and all, even going out before the match. They were like I imagined they might be. They were friendly, and they were jolly, and they were funny looking, and but they were strong, and they were physically.
I got the impression they weren't quite in fifth gear.
No, maybe not, but I'm not taking that.
I remember being closer to second gear in flat out, trying to hang on to their coach.
Maybe so, but there wasn't. Anyway, it was a good 0-0 draw.
And an evening game as well.
It was great. It was a lovely day.
People forget that young generation just no recollection of that whatsoever, like the old stadium there. It's amazing, isn't it?
Place was jammed, and it was a lovely evening, and it was a really good game. It was the tactical thing but there were so many of their players were so good, but it was also, but I go back to Perlo and him running the game and the range of passing and the little run, little trot after the pass to be available for the next one and so on.
There's a question in from Tom. I'll throw this one to you, Kenny, then. Is there a player who you found much better in person than they appear on TV? And what he's saying here is, this doesn't have to be someone you played against, but just actually watching a game and you're there in person going, geez, this fella's a lot better than he looks on TV.
Well, actually playing against them when I came up against them on the pitch.
Yeah, or if you prefer, then just watching from the sideline.
I need to be prepped these questions. Bro.
I've got one for you, by the way.
I tell you who, just popped into my head. Generally, my recollection wouldn't be great.
It's a liar.
It's such a lie.
It's true.
So every piece goes along this pattern where you're like, I can't answer that, and then an hour later you're still talking.
No, but I played against, so I would have come against some good centre forwards, mainly at our level. We played. You spoke about that Brazilian team. We had France in that group. Obviously, that group we were in, Henry and one or two others as well. Yeah, but I remember at Wimbledon. It wasn't in Birmingham. Going out to Stamford Bridge and playing Chelsea. I would have been, in my 30s then. Can't remember if my legs were shot down. Anyway, it didn't matter. But Crespo was playing up front for Chelsea, and I'd watched a lot of him play. He played predominantly in Italy, Serie A. And I always liked him as decent, good goal scored and record. But I'd always looked at him and thought, well, look, he's not the quickest thing on two legs. He never was, over the ground. Physically, probably not the most imposing, wasn't technically at the very highest level in terms of dropping the shoulder and beating people and just blow you away in terms of his technical ability, but a kind of good all-round game. So he was the type of fella I always thought, if I'm really at my game, concentration, the whole shebang, hopefully I won't get too embarrassed by him, as opposed to the others who'd run past you, too much pace, technical ability could twist you inside out. So he was one going onto the pitch. I thought, just keep me concentration, I should be all right. But I remember it was one of the worst afternoons I had against him. But the reason was just his intelligence, Brian, the timing of his runs. He was such a clever operator. Just never saw him play centre forward against me, but I was always looking for him for the whole of 90 minutes. Never stood in front, you could never see him. Was always looking for him. And when I took my eyes off him,
then he'd move.
Timing of his runs. You turn to look for him to be gone past you. The amount of times that he did it. And I remember thinking that Jordan the game, at the end of the game, wow, that's phenomenal. From stripping him down to the basics, thinking I can handle that. But it was what was going on between his ears, his intelligence, time of his runs. He was killing me time and time again. I remember thinking, wow, phenomenal. So it just goes to show you, if you have that between your ears, no matter what area of the pitch that you're in, you're a step ahead of the game already.
He's watching the game and he's always also watching you, and when you're looking at the ball, that's when he's making his move.
Yeah, exactly. He's watching me thinking, feckin' hell, this fella ever earn a living from it.
He's captain of Ireland, that lad.
He's thinking, if I don't get a man in the match awards, I never will against this fella. But yeah, so that was, so if you're asked for me that one, to do the stars about, they come onto the pitch and they don't disappoint, you know what's coming. But maybe you're right, maybe in that situation,
that's a great one.
It kind of surprised me a little bit, yeah.
Anyone for you, Brian, that you thought, I didn't realise he was that good?
Present company excluded.
In terms of, I can't think of anyone. Players, I mean, the international teams, I suppose the most difficult time we had when I was manager was the matches with Switzerland, because of what happened previously. And mixed last game, they lost to Switzerland here, and we ended up in the group. We got back. We got to play Georgia and Albania were next four, and we won 3 and drew 1, and it got us back in. Then we played Russia, and we drew 1-1 with Russia, and then the last match was Switzerland away, and I'd seen them and obviously looked at the videos and some of it inside out. I suppose the thing that surprised me was there was a little fella. There was the two. One of them was the manager now. Yakin Hacken and Murat Hacken, and one of them played centre forward off the front.
Yeah, that's
he was a handful. He was a handful, and the brother was centre half, and he didn't look the most mobile. He looked like kind of, a bit heavy and burly looking. The fella's manager now, Murat, but he was very, very effective. But but the one that was the fulcrum of the team was the fella Vogel. Do you remember him? Little fella in the middle, kind of blondie fella, played just in front of the back four, and he got it into him, you know, and he ran it. And I remember someone around the Liverpool asking me about him. You know, I said, he's a very, very good player. I said, a very underrated player. Yeah. And they signed him then. Liverpool signed him. And he didn't play a huge amount, but it was him and the Hagen fella, because the fella played off the front, where he picked up awkward positions as well, didn't he? And he could move a bit. Sorry.
We're going to a dark place.
We'll move on to current stuff now. Do you know a fella who, listen, he looked great on TV as well, obviously, but Nicholas Anelka in person had more about him, I found, being at a couple of games than I realised on TV. There was an Ireland-France game, I think it was the handball game, and every time he got the ball, even if it was midfield, even if it was 30, 40 yards from goal, there was that little buzz in the stadium. Didn't come through in TV the same way. Obviously,
he probably wasn't seen the same way though in England, because he was one of many great French players who was playing there. When he was playing the national team, there was probably something about him that they felt they could trust him a bit.
I just thought in person he moved over the ground in a way that even just looked better than it had on TV.
Another with them, he was like naturally, he was a runner almost.
He was like lightning when he got going.
Yeah. Liverpool 4-1 in Napoli. They're 7th in the Premier League table, 9 points after 6 games. They're already 5 points off City. Klopp said, we have to reinvent ourselves. He said the basic things are not there at the moment. So people are talking about some kind of fatigue, physically or mentally, with Liverpool. And there's the injury situation as well. Kenny, do you see Liverpool turning this around and being thereabouts come to the end of the season? Or is this looking a bit more serious than that?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's any of those 3 things that you've mentioned. What did you said? Physical fatigue, mental fatigue, and what was it?
Well, injuries are part of it.
No, I don't see any of them being the issues. They can get all those injured players back fit and available, and nothing much is going to change for me. I think individual performances is a bit of a drop off there. You could argue, there's a small uplift there. I'd be interested in asking Klopp, maybe just getting a bit more data in terms of what he said there. We have to reinvent ourselves. I'd love to know what he means by that in terms of the reinvention. What exactly is he talking about? Maybe their style of play.
I think
going forward as opposed to success they've had up to this point.
I think it was a phrase he used under pressure after match. He had done so many interviews and he was still doing another one, and he was trying to scram, because he's normally so confident, so strong, and it flows with him after the matches. But I think he was coming through a period now where he's gone, jeepers, we do appear to be in a bit of trouble. I was able to make some allowances up until now, but now it's repetitive. We're getting caught. There's more goals, more chances. So many players are off. Alexander Arnold, in particular, Fabinho, who we would have relied on so much. The centre-back pairing, Gomez, was a disaster. Van Dijk making consistent mistakes now, or getting caught. Salah, not like a ball running all under his foot, out of play, over the end line when he had a chance. Ball up the line from Trent, and he lets it bounce into touch where he looked like he was comfortable. I think it was a frustration. The word he used, you're right, he did say reinvent. You called it, Joe, reinvent ourselves. I don't know whether he... But that's what he really meant. But he obviously means we've got to have a serious look. And because he expanded on that, was saying, and it should be fun trying to do it in the middle of the Premier League or during the Premier League season and Champions League. So what he's saying is, I haven't got pre-season to fix this now. It's on the go. But yeah,
like, but again, I don't know what he's. I'm not exactly sure what he's talking. If he's talking about getting back to where they were previously, I don't think that's possible with this group of players, because I don't think individually they got the attributes to play the type of football that they have done over the previous few years. So they haven't got.
Why not physically?
No, they haven't got the players there to. Predominantly in that central midfield area is kind of what we're talking about. So the success they had.
And you're talking about the defensive side of it as well. Can they continue to play the high line the way they've played it and got away with it, because Van Dijk was so quick on the recovery. Gomez or Method were reliable full-backs, were generally advanced, but they recovered, and Trent isn't, and the goalkeeper was out and got them out of trouble, and he faced more one-to-ones than anyone else at that level, and they relied on him to do that.
But the big reason they got away with it, Brian, wasn't because of Van Dijk's recovery speed or his starting position, Alisson. It was about the type of pressure that they were getting higher up the pitch.
I agree.
Predominantly wasn't coming from the front three. It was the midfield three. I wouldn't even say the midfield three. For me, it was the two number 8s who played either side of Fabinho. You're talking about Fabinho, the amount of mistakes that he's making now, getting caught out. He's getting caught out because he hasn't got that protection in front of him, and now he's getting more exposed in that central midfield there. He hasn't got the legs.
It doesn't look an impressive unit.
It doesn't for that reason. When Liverpool are at their best, when Wijnaldum and Henderson physically at their absolutely peak, just running over people, suffocating teams, just pressing hard. He was the one just sat behind in the pocket, and he was just intercepting things, basically just sitting in behind, sliding across and kind of sweeping up behind him in that kind of number 6 role. Liverpool now, for me, don't have those players. Henderson now serious drop off in terms of his.
Well, Milner's been playing, and Harvey Elliott. That's
Elliott's the technical player, probably not. Still developing. I'm a huge fan of him. Doesn't look as he's not going to have that type of impact in terms of physically imposing themselves press as those other players.